Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to intro my vlog of reading Direbound by Sable Sorensen. So this is gonna be a non-spoiler vlog plus a spoiler-filled recap and discussion. The first part will be all non-spoiler, and then the last part and probably the longest part of this video will all be spoilers. Both of them are gonna be vlog style, but I do have to say, if I were you, I would choose one or the other. So if you have read Direbound, then just skip the non-spoiler section and go straight to the recap and discussion. But if you have not read it, then just stick to the non-spoiler section, of course. Also, with the recap, the way I structure my recaps is usually I update you in increments of about 100 pages. And it is clear from the timestamps like which chapters I'm recapping, and I try not to spoil things ahead of chapters I'm discussing. So that means if I have like a major theory and it ends up spoiling the plot in like later chapters, I will edit it in those later chapters. I don't know if that made any sense. Hopefully it makes sense. So theories that end up being spoilers, I will edit out of when I was theorizing about it and put it in to the chapters when it's actually revealed in the book. Meaning, if you want to read this book with me, you can. Just make sure you check in the timestamps which chapters I'm recapping, and so then you can read those chapters and then watch what my thoughts were. So yes, I feel like this intro was longer than it needed to be. So let's cue to the non-spoiler vlog of Direbound. I'm on chapter 20 of Direbound. Yeah, let's give you the synopsis first, and then I'm gonna give you my thoughts, of course. So Direbound is a romantasy book featuring dire wolves. So the book starts off where you follow Marin Cooper, who's a commoner. She is pretty poor. Her mother is mentally ill. She has a little sister, and Marin is basically responsible for taking care of them. Her father is probably dead, although I do have to say it's not confirmed, but he went off to war when her mother was still pregnant with her sister, and he never returned. So of course they assume he died. Marin fights in these like fighting pits to earn some extra coin for the family, and she's trying to do things her own way to help the people around her because the children of the commoners keep getting kidnapped by these vampire-like creatures. So this country she lives in is at war. So her country is the direwolf side, and the other side has vampires, which, let me see what they're called. Siphons. So the country of Nocturna, where Marin is from, is at war with the country of Astriona, and like I said, the Nocturna have these elite warriors called the Bonded who bond with direwolf. They help the country in their war, and then the other side has like immortal vampire-like creatures. The children of the commoners who are not the Bonded, they keep getting kidnapped by what they call the Nabbers, who they think are the siphons. Marin, with the help of the guy who trained her, is trying to train the children so they can defend themselves, but then her own little sister gets kidnapped. So she's frantic. She doesn't know what to do, so she ends up enlisting in the army because she thinks if she gets sent to the front, she can try and find her sister. But her boyfriend, who is this guy she's been dating for a year, tells her that the timing is off because she enlisted at the time of the bonding trials, meaning she has to participate in the bonding trials. And the bonding trials are where you have to bond with these direwolves. So the direwolves live up on this mountain called Mount Wolfsbane, and you have to climb up the mountain and see if a direwolf will bond with you. If you do not bond, then you have to leave the mountain alone, and then you can actually enlist in the normal army. But if you bond, then you have to go through the bonding trials, which last 4 months. She is vehement that she definitely doesn't want to bond because she cannot afford to spend 4 months in these bonding trials when she wants to find her sister at the front. But then this large, majestic direwolf who has never bonded before ends up bonding with her, even though Marin made it clear that she has no interest in bonding. And she assumed that if you make it clear to the direwolves that you do not want to bond, then they will have no interest in bonding with you. But Anasa, this direwolf, doesn't really give a fuck, so she ends up bonding with Marin, which seems strange because Anasa also has no interest in working with Marin, even though she did bond with her. So I have my theories, even though I really know nothing of this world yet. So normally this is like a fourth wing type magic, which, yes, this book gets compared to Fourth Wing a lot, and I can definitely see that. Although there are some clear differences. What is supposed to happen if you bond with your direwolf correctly is that you can communicate with them in your head, which that is one of the things I love in books. Whenever there is a way for somebody to communicate with somebody else in their head, I just find that so entertaining. Fourth Wing, of course, is a great example of that, but also One Dark Window has that aspect, and that is one of my favorite things about that book. And also Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross also has that, and I also really love that book for that particular aspect. The problem with the bond between Marin and Anasa, however, is that Anasa is refusing to communicate with Marin, so obviously that causes some strife between them. And that is basically where I'm at. So Marin has just entered these trials, they're in training, some secrets have been revealed already, and she is definitely the odd one out because in this world, these bonded are obviously from, like, there's obviously bonded families, and usually the people who bond are from bonded families, and only like very few exceptions are from not bonded families. And in fact, in this year's bonded trials, only 2 people are not from bonded families, Marin being one of them. So she feels like the odd one out. She feels like she's set up to fail. Usually when somebody bonds with their wolf, they get like one streak of hair that turns a different color. Marin, however, is special, of course. Her entire hair turned silver. So there's something about Marin. Also, her mother, who seems to be mentally ill, I feel like there's more going on there. I feel like that's a type of magic that is going on. I am enjoying this book. I do have to say, I got sick yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and I still don't feel too well. So I've been reading this book slower than I wanted to. So I keep putting this book down, or I keep not wanting to pick it up. But there were some portions in here where I could not stop reading. So I do feel like, especially if you're feeling well, this is compulsively readable. Like, I do want to know. I have some theories that I want to find out. There is a love interest that is a bit mysterious that I want to know more about. There seems to be some sort of love triangle, or maybe even oh, I choose situation going on. I don't know. That is just my delusions. At the very least, my hair is just not cooperating. At the very least, there seems to be a love triangle set up. I do like Marin as a character. I feel like she's fierce, she's competent, she is a fierce warrior. So I do feel like, even though she has issues with Anasa, of course, technically she doesn't need the wolf to succeed, in my opinion. She's already shown herself to be capable without her wolf. There's a friendship between her and two twin sisters who I do enjoy that friendship. And I always like whenever there's a trial or a competition going on. Yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. Even though I'm on page 202 in my edition, I'm not even halfway through because my edition is 576 pages. So I guess those are my thoughts so far. Definitely enjoying it. And I'm wondering what is going to happen with Marin and Anasa for sure. Like, I want them to communicate, so hopefully that will happen. Also, even though Marin is welcomed by some of the bonded are fixated on her. So within the bonded recruits, some of them want to kill her for no apparent reason. And there's an instructor who I'm pretty sure is going to be the love interest, who keeps looking at her. She thinks he wants her to fail. I think there's more going on. But yeah, I believe that is going to be the love interest. So I am interested to see how that is going to develop. So far, nothing really has happened. Well, I mean, one scene happened. But technically, it's not supposed to be romantic, even though it was really hot. Also, which I believe it's this sword right here. There's a king in this world who is technically not a bonded, like he is a mere human, but he has this sword that can control both the dire wolves and their bonded. So I feel like that is also gonna come into play. Like the fact that he can control them, me thinks maybe a rebellion is gonna brew because of that. So I don't know, we'll see. Another thing that is going on that I find an interesting plot point is, obviously I talked about like these nabbers and these kids that are kidnapped. None of the bonded seem to know anything about that. Even people in higher ranking places seem to not know that this is happening. So I find that also very interesting. Why is that? So my theory is it's not actually the siphons who are doing that. I think it's something else. But I cannot even begin to theorize on what that could be. So yeah, those are my thoughts so far, my non-spoiler thoughts. And I guess you'll see me probably when I finish. But if you want my spoiler thoughts, then check out my recap section, because there I give you my thoughts as they come up while reading this book. All right, I finished Direbound yesterday and I wanted to update you yesterday, but somebody decided to start drilling well into the evening, so that footage, I actually started and then I realized, wait a minute, I have to actually yell to get my point across, so we're here to finally update you. This book took me way too long to finish because yes, it's a pretty long book. It's like just under 600 pages, and which is one of my criticisms about it. So like the reason it took me way too long to finish is partly because of the book, but also partly because I was sick. So right now it's Monday. I've been sick for about a week because Tuesday evening I started not really feeling too well, and that is around the time I started this book. Every day I read less than I wanted to, but I also feel like this book is a bit too long and repetitive. Like I feel like this book could have been edited down 100 pages. So I feel like this would have been perfect around 500 pages or so, as opposed to around 600 pages or so. It became abundantly clear in and I don't know if I would have noticed necessarily if it wasn't for me recapping this book, because I found myself going through similar plot points and things I've already seen over and over and over again. And it just wasn't necessary. I feel like you could have gotten the same points across without us seeing 10 scenes that are pretty similar. And especially two big storylines, I felt like we spent way too many pages on it. One I cannot really spoil, and the other one had something to do with things Maren was seeing in dreams. So I gave this book 4 stars. Like I was really umming and ahhing because yes, I had some glaring issues with it, but I was also very entertained at a couple parts. Like there were moments where I physically could not stop reading. Like, yes, when I put this book down during like one of those repetitive moments or like long stretches of nothing really happening, yes, then I could put it down and probably not pick it up for a week. But then there were moments where I physically could not stop reading because it was so entertaining. And I have to say, I also tandem read this book, so I read it while listening to the audiobook, and the audiobook was very well done. It's a duet narration. Well, technically, so this is single point of view from Maren's point of view, but you have the male narrating doing every man speaking scene. So I did enjoy that, and I feel like if it wasn't for the audiobook, this book would have taken me even longer to finish. So I did like that experience. So yeah, 4 stars. But there are a couple storylines in here that are very reminiscent of other books. The one people compare it to the most is Fourth Wing, of course. And yes, obviously, not just in the fact that you bond with a direwolf and then you can telepathically communicate. There are other more spoilery storylines that I feel like are very similar to Fourth Wing. But I mean, I knew that going in, so I cannot really sit here and like complain about that, because if I didn't want that, I probably shouldn't have picked this book up. What I did find fascinating though is that this book was more gruesome than I thought it would be. Like they go into detail about torture scenes or somebody killing somebody else, and they go through that in detail. And like I said, I didn't really expect that. You don't really get that a whole lot in romantasy, I feel like. So that was kind of refreshing, I guess. Maren as a character, I found myself like in the beginning, I really loved her as a character. I don't know if I said in the non-spoiler part, but yeah, I really enjoyed her as a character. I thought she was like a badass. But as the book went on, and maybe that has something to do with the repetitiveness of it all, I found myself having more and more issues with her. I felt like she was very, very, very self-centered. I feel like she thought the whole world revolved around her. You know those people where if somebody looks at them a bit weird, or if somebody is looking at them maybe in an angry way, they immediately internalize that and think that has something to do with me, while maybe in reality, they were thinking about something that had nothing to do. Like maybe they were seeming angry because they just found out that their boyfriend cheated, which obviously had nothing to do with you, yet you think, oh, they're looking at me angry, so they must hate me. I've had people like that, especially in high school. I had a friend who was like that, and it was so annoying because why? You don't know this person, they're looking at you. Why would you automatically assume that they hate you? Anyway, so Marin was exactly that type of character. Just because somebody was staring at her, she immediately assumed they hated her, they wanted to murder her. And to be fair to her, and I said this in my recap section, tell me not everything is about me, but what if it is? Because in this world, yes, there are some things that do revolve around her, but I do feel like she had no real evidence supporting her judgments, yet she proclaimed her thoughts as if they were fact, and I have issues with those characters. Also, I felt like she was judgy. I feel like she was judging people too harshly when it's not like she was beyond reproach. So yeah, but I feel like the bare bones of Marin, hopefully in book 2, we're getting more of the Marin that I really enjoyed in the beginning. So 4 stars. I do have to say with this book, it's good that I'm reading it right now, a week before book 2 comes out, because I am excited about book 2. I obviously will be reading book 2, and I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with book 2. This is exactly the type of book that had I read it a year ago, around the time it came out, I don't know if I would be as excited to read book 2 now. In fact, there might be a chance I would not be picking up book 2 now. So that is this kind of book, like this through 4 star, like this is on the lower end of 4 star for me. It probably would be a bit forgettable a year in. Like I said, because of my criticisms with it, I don't know if I would be picking up book 2 now. So good for me that I actually decided to read it now. And yes, like I said, I will be picking up book 2. So you can look forward to me reading and recapping book 2. Do I have any other thoughts? I think that's it. If you've read this book, you want more detailed, in-depth discussions, then I would say stick around and watch my recap / discussion. Yeah, if you're not sticking around, I really want to thank you for watching. Are you planning on reading this? Let me know all your thoughts. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably leave, because from this moment on, it will be all spoilers. I will be going in depth, discussing plot points and spoiler thoughts. So let's cue to the spoiler recap section. Okay, so this is my recap of the first part of this book, which is chapter 1 through 11. Okay, so the book starts off with us seeing Marin Cooper, aka the infamous alley cat of the Eastern Quarter, fighting in this fighting ring, kicking somebody's ass. And like she's using the fact that she's a girl against him, like feigning that she's like weak until she almost kills him, which already in the beginning of this book, I already am very partial to Marin. I think she's such a great character so far. I mean, obviously, I'm not even 1/5 of the way through, but I like how strong she is and her moral compass. So far, I am enjoying her character. We meet Igor, who's her trainer, and he has been training her very well. He's also her neighbor, and they seem to have a very good relationship. And we also meet Lee, who is like her lover, and like they are pretty serious about each other. At least he's very serious about her. I already know he's not going to be the love interest, so yeah, we'll see if this is going to be like a love triangle situation. So Marin lives in Sturmfrost, which is a bonded city, and there are like these different quarters, and some more poor than others. Marin's father has died in the war, or at least he fought in the war and never returned. She has a little sister, Ceres, who she feels very responsible for, and she has a mother who has some sort of mental illness. Although I think there's more to that story. I'll get to that when we actually see an episode from her mom. We find out about the fact that the children from these quarters keep getting kidnapped by the nabbers, which that storyline will come back. We see Marin, after thinking that her sister was kidnapped, after hearing somebody from her quarter, like a girl from her quarter being kidnapped, she comes home and her mother says, Lumina, they've been terrorists today, the twins. They're trying to find you, but they never listen to me. Never, never, never. I have a theory about that, but I will talk about that theory later. There's a war going on in this country. So you have Nocturna over here. I don't know if you can see that. Nocturna. And you have Astriona. And over here, like in the middle, there's the war. In the country of Astriona live the Siphons, our ancient monstrous enemy. They steal our kids out of their beds and take them back across the border, turning them into living blood bags, feeding off them, sucking out their powerful child life force, and eventually draining and killing them. So, immortal vampires. Of course, in Nocturna is where the direwolves live. So the war has been going on for 500 years. And because their side has the countries bonded and their direwolves, and the other side has the siphon strength, is rare for either side to take much ground. But of course, these siphons keep getting into their city and kidnapping their kids, so there is that. We find out that the bonded are the king's most elite forces. Soldiers who have mental bonds with massive, fearsome direwolves. Technically, anybody can become bonded, but most of the bonded are from bonded families. If you want to become bonded to your direwolf, you have to go through the bonding trials. So this is a trial book, which is amazing. And there's this very poignant, very true quote that, forget her name, Maris? That Marin says, privilege begets more privilege, a never-ending cycle. Ain't that the motherfucking truth, okay? And then we meet an interesting character who I think is the love interest, since she does spend a lot of time on this seemingly random guy. She sees this direwolf rider in his late 20s with light brown skin and dark messy hair. And he's undeniably beautiful, but he has kill tattoos, a lot of them. And he apparently has killed hundreds, and we see him killing somebody right then and there. So this man is vicious, and he will come back, don't you worry. Marin, being tired of seeing all these kids in her district be defenseless, she convinces Igor to help her train these kids to fight the siphons. So they do that, and it seems to be a success. Sorry if I'm looking down, I'm reading from the book. Usually I read on ebook, but this book I already owned in hardback, and the ebook was a bit more expensive. I prefer annotating and doing my recaps on ebooks, but here we are. Okay, so then we get another episode from Marin's mom. Nocturne is trapped. He's trapped, and when he escapes, he's going to tear the world apart. And then she turns to Marin and says, and you are not where you are meant to be. So I think Marin's mom is having premonitions of some sort, because later she does think in her head that it seems to be genetic. Like her grandmother has also gone mad, and her great-grandmother also has gone mad. I don't think they're going mad. I think they're having visions. That's my theory. So we'll see if that's correct. So Nocturne, obviously their country is called Nocturna. And the twins. We do meet a pair of twins. Does that mean anything? We'll see. And then, plot twist that everybody saw coming. Sayla, Marin's little sister, gets kidnapped. So now Marin, who she's always felt responsible for Sayla since when her father disappeared, she was pregnant with Sayla, meaning it was really Marin taking care of Sayla. So she always felt like Sayla was hers. So at first they're looking for her, of course, but when they cannot find her, Marin decides to enlist in the army, which she actually had a exception for being a caretaker, since she's the caretaker for her mom and her sister. But since she's so desperate to find her sister, she waives her exception. And of course, the army accepts. So now she's in the army. And when she goes and tells Lee, he tells her that her timing is awful because there's about to be a bonding trial. It seems like everybody that is conscripted into the army around the time of the bonding trials is forced to participate. So now she's forced to participate, even though she has no interest in becoming a bonded. Before Maren leaves, her mother gives her this necklace, a teardrop-shaped opal pendant set in gold. And her mother says it's for protection. She doesn't end up taking the necklace, but I once again think this necklace will play some sort of role or part in this book. Maren meets some other recruits. So there is a clear difference between the commoner recruits and the bonded recruits from the bonded families. She meets Alessandra, who, spoiler, will not be with us for long. And she meets Henry, who's a commoner, but he really wants to be a bonded. We see that guy again, the guy that I told you was probably going to be her love interest. He is Stark Terrion, alpha of the Deimos Pack, and one of the instructors during this year's bonding trials. So we're going to see a lot more of him. Maren sees one of the bonded girls she saw the night before get attacked by another bonded guy who seems to want to kill her for rejecting him. So Maren, of course, is not going to stand for that. So she ends up saving her, which, yes, I'm cheering on Maren from the sidelines, which that decision does end up benefiting her. But of course, she did that not knowing that. So the girl she saves is Isabel, and her twin sister is Venna. Actually, Venna is hard of hearing, so they communicate with sign language. So I do like that representation in here. And because she saved Isabel, they invite her to join them on the ascent because they have to climb this mountain, Mount Wolfsbane, because at the top of the mountain is where the direwolves are that have not bonded yet. And there are two ways to get to this mountain, like the fastest, more difficult route, and that is the path that the people will take who really want to bond. And then there's a path that takes longer but is a bit safer. And Maren, who has no interest in bonding because she wants to actually go to the front because she wants to find her sister, wants to take the longer route, so she has no chance of bonding. But they tell her that that's not necessarily the safest route and that she should just come with them and they'll help each other out. And since she was planning on having allies anyway, she ends up joining them. And before she actually makes that decision, she actually sees Stark looking at her, and he already threatened the recruits that basically him and his direwolf were going to be hunting them. So she knows that if she takes, she thinks that if she takes a longer route, then Stark will hunt her, which I don't know what her reasoning for that is. But anyway, those two things lead to her accepting their offer. And that climb sounds fucking horrible, as if I needed any more reasons not to climb a mountain. This book definitely gave it, because just reading it made me exhausted, really. While they're climbing, an interesting thing happens, because Maren ends up talking about her sister and telling Venna and Isabel about the nabbers, and they have no idea what that is, which is an interesting tidbit. Okay, why do they not know what that is? I have a feeling these nabbers are not actually the vampires, is my thought. I don't know if it's actually the bonded, or else it's somebody else high in power that wants these kids for some reason. When they finally get to the top, we meet the direwolves. They are described as massive. Maren, who's already described herself as a very tall girl, her head doesn't even reach up to their shoulders. Maren is kind of observing these recruits getting bonded. So whenever a recruit bonds to a particular direwolf, a part of their hair will turn a different color. There's 4 different colors your hair can turn. And while she's observing, she feels things in her head, and she thinks probably rightfully so, that it's these werewolves wanting to bond with her, or these direwolves wanting to bond with her, and she keeps saying, I don't want to be bonded, because apparently if you make it known that you have no interest in being bonded, they will leave you alone. So she does that, and at first she doesn't get bonded with a werewolf, with a direwolf. Sorry, if I say werewolf, I mean direwolf. Also, we see that once a recruit is bonded with a direwolf, their injuries heal. So that is a bit of that magic we heard about previously. And then we meet a wolf, unlike any other wolf, who looks simultaneously older and more powerful than any of the others. And her name is Anessa. She never bonds. They say she's been here for hundreds of years. And of course, she's interested in Maris. So they do end up bonding, even though Maris made it abundantly clear that she definitely didn't want to bond with her. And after Marin is bonded with her, she doesn't just get one streak of silver in her hair. Her whole hair turns silver, which actually, my dust jacket on the back, it has that scene. So look, there's Marin and Anassa. Everybody that could bonded. Stark tells the people who have not bonded to go back to like the regular army, and to the people who have bonded, he tells them, you and your wolf must make it back to the training center in the castle before nightfall. From that point forward, you will be officially considered a raw bond, a trainee. If you do not make it in time, do not bother trying to enter the castle, because if you fail, your connection with your wolf will sever and you will die. Good luck. So a severed bond between a rider and their direwolf will lead to death of the rider, which that didn't seem to be information that Marin knew. Of course, now the stakes are very high, and Marin wants to communicate with her direwolf, but the direwolf is not talking back, and she isn't letting her mount her. So Marin, after trying a couple times, decides to run down the mountain so that she can make it in time. This girl is so fucking strong. Like, I cannot even believe it. Like, after a brutal ascent up this mountain, after fighting twice, now she still has strength left to run down a slippery mountain. That could definitely not be me. Like, not in a million years. Like, not even if you asked, like, if you told me that I would get $10 million in return, I could still not do it, okay? While she's running down the mountain, we actually see a dead Alessandra, so that is sad. But I mean, of course, we don't really know Alessandra, so there's that. I actually did think that was going to be a prominent side character, but she's dead now, so that's not the case. When Marin finally makes it down to the gate, she finds out that Anassa had been behind her the whole time. That's going to be an interesting storyline. Like the bond between her and Anassa. I'm not even sure if I am pronouncing her name right, even though I'm listening to the audiobook. Let me actually go back and listen one more time.
Anassa stalks toward...
Yeah, Anassa. Okay, sorry. The woman waiting at the gate calls Marin Strategos raw bond. Okay, so I already know what strategos means, but it's gonna be actually revealed in the next chapter, so I'm gonna leave it here. So far, I'm really enjoying it. I am. Parts of it I'm reading a bit slower than I wanted to, but then there was a chunk while they were climbing up the mountain that I just kept reading and was basically inhaling this book. So I do feel like now that we're finally in the midst of the story, like her actually being bonded to a direwolf, the story actually taking off, her actually meeting who I'm assuming is her love interest, I feel like I'm a bit more intrigued than when she was still. Like, I get it, we needed it to set up the story, to set up the stakes. Yes, it's interesting to find out about her life before she became a bonded, but it wasn't like I wasn't that intrigued at that point, but now I definitely am. I guess I already told you all my theories while talking. I cannot really tell you anything about a rating because, like I said, I'm not even 1/5 of the way through, so I still have a lot of reading to do. I'm in no real hurry to finish this book, but I do want to read at least 100 pages tomorrow. or at least get to chapter 20 to do my next update. So hopefully I can accomplish that tomorrow. So I'm on chapter 20, and I do have to say I'm reading this book slower than I wanted to because I've been sick the last couple of days, so I haven't really been in the mood to read this book. But then there are some points in this book where I just could not stop reading when I did finally pick it up. So overall, I am enjoying it. It's not the book's fault that I wasn't really into reading the last couple of days. But today I have read a lot. Yeah, let's just talk through the things I read. All right, so in the last section, I talked about the fact that Marin was called Stratego raw bond. So we find out that there are 4 different delineations in like these direwolf packs. So there are Strategos, which obviously Marin is a part of, and they are the tacticians and leaders of the bonded packs. And their wolves all have silver and or white coloring. Then there are the Deimos. They are the warriors known for their brutality and physical prowess. And their wolves have dark coloring. Some are deep black in color, which I'm pretty sure Stark is one of the Deimos. Then there are the Kryptos, who are the shadow walkers and spies. And their wolves have a deeper gray or speckled coat. And then there are the Philax, the Guardians, focus on defense and protection, and their wolves have a tan and brown coloring, which Vena is part of the Kryptos, yes. So we see the dormitories, I guess. So we find out more about the castle, which I think is going to play more of a part than I initially thought it was going to play. So basically this castle is divided in half. So one of the halves is for raw bond training. And the reason it's in the castle is so the king can keep an eye on them. And in my opinion, also to control them, because we do find out that he can control them. And then the other half of the castle is for the king and his family. Marin finally actually realizes the difference between the poor commoners and the bonded, because she sees that even their recruits and the bonded trainees get so much luxury compared to what she's used to. So they get more food that they can eat. They have like these luxurious dorm rooms, beautiful baths, they get warm water, stuff like that. So like it is an unfair world. I do want to discuss that after a certain reveal. Once again, Lumina comes back, and this time it is Marin who hears it. So yeah, it seems like she is getting the same voices in her head that her mother has. We meet another character whose name is Thomason. We're gonna see him more in this section. So he's pretty popular. He talks a lot, but people do like him, except for Isabel, who for some reason hates him. I do think there's gonna be a romance between these two. So we get another scene between Stark and Marin, sort of. So the instructors introduce themselves the day after the bonding. He once again keeps staring at her for some reason, and we find out more information about him. So I did tell you I don't know if I said, but he's the alpha of the Deimos. And for some reason, he's spared for this bonding trial, and it seems like that is not really a common thing to do. And they say that he's the sovereign alpha son, which I don't know what that means, but anyway. I feel like the sovereign alpha, I think that's like the alpha of all alphas. I don't know. I may sound dumb in the future. So there are like some recruits who are drooling over him, which I don't really blame them. We meet Eldritch Gnosis. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Who is a former alpha of Strategos. He's the head of the raw bond training. We don't really see him after this particular scene. So I don't know. I don't know if he's an interesting character. And we find out that these bonding trials are 4 months, which obviously is not good for Marin considering her sister is gone and she wants to find her. We find out more about the trials, which I don't know if that's interesting to talk about. Okay, let me go through it really quickly. So the training begins with the forging, a 2-month process with your own pack's raw bonds, intended to get to know your future packmates and ensure you can work together. And then there is the voice trials after that, where you have to prove that you can communicate with your direwolf, which is going to be a problem for Maren considering she cannot communicate with Anasa. Then there's the purge trials, where the packs have a chance to call their own numbers and remove any riders and direwolf not fit to join them. So this is a very brutal 4 months where like these authors are not afraid to call some pack members, followed by the forging ball, of course. I 100% agree with Maren. Sure, because who wouldn't follow a brutal massacre with a fancy ball? Then we move on to the proving period, a 2-month period where packs learn to work together in coordination. And it ends with a unity trial or mock battle between all the packs, and then graduation. Interesting. I'm looking forward to the ball. I'm wondering what is going to happen with the ball, which we're nowhere near that. Okay, so after Maren hears all that, she decides that she needs to get the fuck out of there, okay? She literally does not have 4 months to spare. She's sneaking around and she's ready to just leave. But when she gets out of the gate, her head begins to hurt and eventually she collapses, meaning she physically cannot leave the premises. So she's stuck there. And Venna explains to her the reason that happened is that the bond between wolf and rider is fragile at first, and distance creates physical strain, and that strain can snap entirely, killing both wolf and rider. So if she leaves, she'll die, which obviously will not help in saving her sister. When Maren asks Venna and Isabel why they're helping her, because she feels like Stark wants her to fail and a lot of the other recruits want her to fail, or trainees want her to fail. Venna and Isabel tell her that because Venna is hard of hearing, the bonded kind of expect her to fail, which is sad to hear. And because Isabel is committed to Venna, they kind of assumed both of them would fail. So they had to work harder to prove everybody else wrong. And they see that same drive in her, the fact that she has to work harder and that she's capable of working harder to prove everybody else wrong. And that's why they befriended her and helped her. And obviously, she forgets that she also saved Isabel, so don't sell yourself short, Maren. Then we get an interesting scene with a lot of reveals. So they have to present themselves to the king and the rest of the court, which sounds very disgusting. So this king sounds like the scum of the earth. Everybody will be on display, and like all the nobility can choose them to fuck them, I guess. Technically, they can say no, but the only person they cannot say no to is the king, who will choose a companion, I guess, for these 4 months. And some of the bonded are really interested in that, which I feel like if the king chooses you as a companion, maybe that will be advantage, because I don't know why else you would actually want that. So obviously Maren has no interest, but she needs to not stand out in order for the king to not choose her. We meet Periel, who's beautiful, popular, and a bitch, so we don't like her. When they get to this place where the trials take place, it's a place where a lot of people have died, of course. Maren starts to hear whispering, which she's the only one who seems to be able to hear that, which, I don't know, I feel like she has the same abilities as her mom has, which you know that I think she can, I don't know, see the future or something, or gets visions or something like that. And Maren seems to also feel like she's going mad, like her mother. Okay, so this sword that the king has is called the Dire Blade, the fabled weapon that supposedly gives him power over all direwolves, bonded and unbonded alike. The pommel is shaped like a glowering direwolf's head, and we do actually see it in action. But before that happens, a big reveal happens. Lee, Maren's boyfriend of a year, turns out to be the crown prince, named Killian. What the actual fuck? Okay, Prince Killian. Yeah. What can you say to that? Like, he's gonna explain it. We're getting to that. So of course, Maren is flabbergasted. She feels betrayed. She feels duped. She's fucking angry. But they cannot speak because he's like up in the stands and she's with the rest of the bonded. So Stark suggests to the king, no time like the present to test their resolve. So the king uses his dire blade to tell them to find and kill the weakest recruit, which makes all the wolves seem maddened. They end up picking this like 18-year-old boy, really. And of course, Maren wants to save him, which in turn turns all the wolves against her, which a part of me is like, why are you so stupid? But then on the other hand, I'm like, I mean, that is part of her character, that she would try to save the like more weaker characters, I guess. But something good happens, I guess, because Anasa ends up saving Maren. So their relationship is complicated, but it is clear that Anasa definitely doesn't want her to die. So that's good. But this boy she wanted to save does end up dying, since the wolves know that they're not going to end up killing... Well, the wolves know that Maren is not the weakest since she has Anasa, but I also think she probably would have survived with that. No, I don't know. If all the wolves turn against you, eventually the king and the prince go up to all these bonded. The king for sure to like pick his companion, but the prince ends up slipping Maren a piece of paper, and when she reads it, he wants her to meet him in the East Garden at midnight. So he's gonna explain what is going on. And before that happens, an interesting thing gets revealed that, and this also reminds me of Fourth Wing, of course. When Maren is appalled when she sees the bonded party and have sex in front of everybody, when a boy literally just died, Isabel explains to her that it is rare, but the wolves sometimes have mates, and the way they find their mates is when their riders have sex together. That is convenient. So that is why these bonded are having sex, is to try and find out if their wolves are mated. I'm sure that is going to come back as a plot point. Then Maren goes and meets Lee/Killian, and he explains to her, because I forgot how they met, but they met, it seems like, randomly. So he saved her sister, right? And he tells her, the moment I saw you, I could not stop myself from wanting to know you, and I knew that if I told you I was the crown prince, you would not give us a chance. So that's why he lied. And then she rightfully asks him why he has not done anything about these nabbers. Because obviously, since he has spent time with Maren, he has been intimately familiar with the lives of these commoners, which I have that same question. And not just about that, but also why hasn't he done anything about like the poverty of these commoners? Why has he just let that happen? So he tells her about these nabbers, that he's been trying to stop the nabbers. He has his guards hunting them since the very first time she's mentioned them. And he also tells her that he is going to do anything he can to find Sayla. And then he drops this interesting nugget. He tells her, my love for you is as unwavering and steady as the winds from Mount Wolfsbane. I'd give it all up if you told me to. I'd abdicate tomorrow. You're the most powerful woman in Nocturna, Maren. You can bring this kingdom to its knees with just one word. You know, even though he's a liar, I do like him, and I know I'm not supposed to, because I'm pretty sure he's not the love interest, or this is really a love triangle, or oh, I choose. I wouldn't be opposed to oh, I choose, but this has not really been as advertised as such. But yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to like him, because I don't think I've heard anybody really discuss the fact that they like him, but I don't know, I do. And also, I feel like, why do we get so much from him? Because we've already had a sex scene between them that was pretty detailed. Now he tells her that he would abdicate the throne for her. I don't know. We'll see. Then she gets attacked, and this was a pretty brutal scene. I did not see this coming at all, but she ends up fighting him off, and I felt like the way she fought him off was kind of cool. So he was holding onto her hair, and she just cuts off her hair with her blade, and then she ends up cutting off his hand and choking him with his own hand, with his own severed head, and that ends up killing him, which I was like, oh my god. I don't think I've read anything this brutal in a while, so I was both in awe, disgusted, and scared. like at the same time. And then we get an interesting scene because of course this kill is gonna have consequences. So Stark shows up at their like dorm and he is very angry because of course they were not supposed to kill each other, you know, outside of training. So of course Maren tells him that it was her. So when she says it was self-defense, he rightfully tells her, how is that self-defense? You choked him with his own severed hand. Which, I mean, yeah. Which, by the way, I forgot to say, but while that was happening, she could feel Anasa being very impressed by Maren. Which, of course, after that, Maren was like, what just happened? What came over me? I'm not this person. This was the first time she actually killed somebody. Stark wants to punish her, so he tells her to get up to the front, and then he explains the bonded, like the tattoos he has, the bonded tattoos. The tattoos on their arms and torso count siphon kills, and the ones on their necks memorialize our bonded comrades we've killed in training. When he asks why do we have these tattoos, somebody says, because unlike the siphons, the bonded cherish life. We get tattoos to remember the steep cost of war. Which Maren rightfully questions that because so far it feels like there's been a lot of unnecessary deaths, which I'm sure the bonded will explain that, you know, we were just culling the weak. Yes, maybe it's sad that we killed them, but they were gonna hold us back anyway, something like that. But it doesn't feel like they cherish the dead, to be honest. So now Maren is the first to get a tattoo, and she gets one on her neck since she killed a bonded comrade. So Stark gives her that tattoo and then he licks her neck. What? Later we find out that it will help heal her, but it was kind of hot, not gonna lie. But he also seems to hate her still, so yeah, there's that. Maren ends up getting her own private room because obviously she's been attacked and they think somebody's after her, but in the back of her mind she thinks, okay, could that have been Killian arranging that? There seems to be a lot of things going on behind the scenes that have something to do with Maren, so I'm sure that will be revealed, hopefully. We find out a bit more about the connection between the wolves and the bonded. It seems like for normal bonded pairs in the beginning they constantly hear each other's thoughts and see what is happening with the other one. Of course, that is not the case with Maren. They seem to have some sort of wall between them, and actually what we find out is that is how it's supposed to be. That is what they're gonna train. But of course, Maren has the opposite problem, is that she needs to find ways to lower that wall whenever she needs to. I'm kind of ready for them to finally be able to communicate. I mean, it is good that Anasa has this instinct to still protect her, but of course, I mean, since I am partial to people talking in the other one's head, what is that called again? Like telepathy. I am liking it. Like I said, I do like the sort of love triangle thing that seems to be going on here with Killian. So far I have liked all the scenes we've got between Maren and Lee/Killian, and you know, I am obviously very intrigued with Stark, but there's still so many questions. Like, what is going on? I want to know about these voices that Maren hears, similar to what happened to her mom. I would like to know why she seems to be targeted, because there's another scene between her and this popular girl, which I already forgot her name. That's how uninterested I am in her. I don't know. But yeah, she seems to have it out for her. Obviously, she was attacked. So yeah, obviously, I mean, she does stand out, that is true, but the other commoner doesn't seem to, but I mean, I guess he doesn't stand out as much as her, but he doesn't seem to have that same problem. So far, aside from the licking scene, we haven't had any actual interaction between Stark and Maren. Aside from that scene, he has never really spoken to her, so I do want that storyline to progress a bit more, and I am interested to see more about like the rest of the trials. Hopefully in the next 100 pages, we actually get another trial. And I also really want to know more about Killian and the things he's actually done behind the scenes, not just the things that he told her, because I mean, like I said, he spent a year actually seeing what's going on with these commoners. So I mean, hopefully, I mean, you would think that has resulted in him sympathizing with our cause, and hopefully that will lead into him actually taking action to improve their lives. So far that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. All right, so I just finished chapter 30, so I'm here to recap the next part. Also, I did decide to play with format within these parts. This is my second time doing, no, technically my third time. This is my third time doing a recap like this. I don't know, especially in this book, where I feel like this book is a bit repetitive, which I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of my recap. I feel like dividing it in storylines, themes, subplots, it's just a better way to go. So that's what I'm gonna do for this section. Let me know what you think about it, because I do feel like with some books it just makes sense not to talk about it in chronological order. So I will be talking about it in chronological order, just within the section within the subplot I'm discussing. So this time I decided to split it up in Anasa, and obviously I'm talking here about the relationship and the bond between Anasa and Maren / pack dynamics and friendships, because those are connected in my opinion, especially in this part. Then I want to talk about the visions, because like I said, they were very repetitive and I feel like it makes more sense to talk about them back to back. Then I want to talk about the Nabbers plot line. I want to talk about some world building, and then I want to get into the romance, Killian and Stark. Yeah. So let's get started with Anasa and the pack. And I do feel like in this section, so this was chapter 20 through 30, I do feel like it was very centered around the whole bond between Anessa and Maren. That was a large part of what these chapters were about, and I did enjoy that storyline. So let's get started. We get a training scene where Stark is once again getting angry at Maren, but then he also seems to be disappointed in Anasa. They're training, riding the direwolves, and also fighting with swords while they're on the direwolves, and Maren kind of sucks. So she keeps getting hit, she keeps falling off Anasa, and she gets hurt because of that. So there's a hot scene between Stark and Maren where he yanks her off Anasa, and then he grabs her shirt and pushes it up. And it's really to actually see all the bruises on her body. And then he starts poking at her ribs, which of course hurts her. And then my queen, Maren, although I do have some issues with her, but not in this department, she spits in his face. Like, girl! And he doesn't retaliate. And throughout this chapter, sometimes she'll think back on that and still think in the back of her head that he will retaliate. So far, he hasn't yet. So he ends up asking Anasa, pointing at Maren's bruises. He asks Anasa, "You want to do anything about that?" And she doesn't. So Anasa obviously could be healing Maren, and she actively decides not to. He ends the confrontation by, of course, lashing out at Maren, saying that she's pathetic, that she's weak, and that she's going to continue being weak. And this seems to be harsh and cruel, obviously, which, I mean, he is. But if you look at the rest of these chapters, it is clear that they're planning on culling the weak. So if she doesn't do anything about this, about her bond between her and Anasa and about being a part of this pack, then she will die. So, I mean, I've read enough romantasy to know that there's more probably going on than him just hating her, which obviously that is Maren. That's the only thing that Maren thinks, that he despises her, that he wants her to die, when I really don't think that's the case. Then we get some fun friendship scenes and training montage. Well, not really a montage, but Maren realizes that she can't sword fight and she really needs help. And Isabel reluctantly and not so reluctantly ends up telling her that Thomason should help her. He's a very good teacher because he's patient, but he doesn't just give praise when it isn't earned. When she actually sees that he's impressed, it's actually because she did something right. And then there is some bantering between Thomason and Isabel. I am just waiting for these two to actually get together. I feel like I'm more interested in their romance than what Maren has going on at the moment. They end up giving her like some training that she needs to do when she has time, and it does end up helping her stay on Anasa and also end up with her, you know, being better with a sword. The chapter, which is chapter 21, this one, ends with, is Killian's warning fair? Is it possible that people like this might actually stab me in the back? Then we get the voice trial, which of course Maren thinks she's gonna fail at. But Anasa, even though they're still not communicating well, I mean, they're not communicating at all. Sometimes she'll get glimpses of strong emotions from Anasa or emotions directed towards Maren. They do end up being third in this obstacle course, but not everybody's impressed. Edith ends up, like a couple pages later, telling Maren that she didn't buy that they actually were talking to each other. She says it was obvious that they were cooperating and not even well, that they looked like enemies who grudgingly chose to work together to survive, and that they barely survived by the skin of their teeth, really. And then she drops this nugget on Maren, because Maren, throughout the whole time that she's been bonded with Anasa, she just assumed that Anasa is the one that was rejecting her, but Edith tells her it's you that's rejecting Anasa, which comes as a shock to Maren. Like, that didn't even seem like a possibility. And then she tells her it's because you haven't accepted this bond, you don't want to be here, you don't want to be bonded to her. So, you know, Edith is cooking her, really. And then they come back to the pack, and once again, Maren tells her, well, they treat me as an outsider. And once again, Edith just flabbergasts her by saying, once again, you think that you're an outsider. That's why they're treating you as an outsider. And then actually Maren asks Isabel and Venna if she has a point, and they do agree with Edith. So, you know, I do like Maren in that she does judge very easily, and she never really thinks anything is her fault. But when somebody actually confronts her, somebody that she seems to respect, she does do some self-reflecting, and she does ask questions, like more questions, like she'll gather evidence, and once she's convinced, she does want to change. So that is something I do like about her character. Maren actually ends up seeking Anasa out and giving her a olive branch by way of, what's it called? Like something she, like direwolves like to eat. Dried mountain sage. So Anasa at first is a bit weary. Once again, it's clear she doesn't trust her. So we finally get to hear her voice. She tells Maren, you finally wish to be here. So it seems like Edith was right. So they do have a conversation, and Maren realizes, okay, so the reason why we got through the voice trial is because Anasa does in fact want this bond. And then Anasa tells her that she will work with her. And then she says, I chose you for a reason, do not make me regret it. So they do decide to work together and try to like strengthen their bond. It's not perfect, but I mean, it's going in the right direction. And like I said, I do like the fact that we're finally getting the telepathy here, that we finally kind of communicate with Anasa. And in my humble opinion, I feel like it took way too long for us to get here. I mean, it's page 250 in my edition. Well, page 249. That is almost halfway through. That is a bit too long, considering this is a book about direwolves and the bond between them and their riders. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, this book could have used some editing, and this is one of the ways we could have gotten that. Anyway, moving on. We get some information about the pack dynamic, and I felt like it fit in this section. Let me just read this to you. Now, after the voice trial, they will begin training to access the deeper abilities unique to each pack. Every pack obviously has its own powers. Amongst the strategos, our wolves can share their enhanced strategic abilities, which are heightened by pack unity. Okay, so in battle, it will manifest in several ways. The first one is an almost prescient understanding of troop movements. 2, the ability to spot weaknesses in enemy formations. 3, to calculate odds and outcomes with supernatural precision. However, accessing this power requires complete synchronization between wolf and rider. So obviously that is why I feel like it fit in this section, because you first have to have a strong bond between one rider and one wolf before you can access like the whole pack. Okay, so something happened between Anasa and Maren. Maren had sex with Killian, which I'll get to that. Obviously the romance part will be at the very end. But she was feeling Anasa at the back of her head, and Maren just shut her out, like put the wall between them again, which obviously that happened very close after they finally had their heart-to-heart. So their relationship is already so very fragile, and to have Maren just like completely shut her off, upset Anasa. So during the training, Anasa is mad at Maren and is not really communicating with her. And that kind of frustrates Maren to the point where she ends up asking a pretty dumb question as far as the pack is concerned, because but it was a question that I was wondering, but like the answer the pack gives is like the answer I feel like I also gave. I don't know if I articulated it as well, but she doesn't understand why they have to cull the pack, like why they have to kill the pack members. They discuss the siphons, and obviously in her mind she thinks, okay, so the more of us there is, the easier it will be to kill the siphons. And she finds out that these trials were not created by the king, were not created by the bonded, they were created by the dire wolves. And of course the reason is that in war the weakest link endangers everyone. We can only succeed against our enemy if we work together, and if any dire wolves or bonded riders might endanger the pack's safety, it's in everyone's best interest to cull them now before we are at war and all our lives are at risk. So of course, Maren feels like, because she feels like everybody's always against her, she feels like, okay, so now I put an even larger target on my back by even asking this question. So then finally she has a heart-to-heart with Anasa. She wants to know, which I feel like is like sometimes Maren is not that smart, because I feel like, why can't you just put two and two together? Like, why do you think she doesn't want to speak to you? Anyway, Anasa tells her, well, you place your own walls between us and then dare to demand that I lay myself bare to you. So obviously Maren is annoyed that Anasa would feel betrayed or feel something about the fact that she got shut off so easily by Maren. So Anasa tells her, you ignorant child, you still do not understand what this bond means. My ability to sense your emotions at all times and for you to sense mine is what keeps us both safe. So that is the reason why she's upset. And obviously Maren really doesn't take the time to try and understand the bonded dynamics really. And then she once again misses the point entirely, because she thinks that Anasa is upset that Maren got with Killian, because Maren obviously thinks that Anasa wants her, Maren that is, to fuck all the Rawbonds so that Anasa can find her mate. And once again, Anasa kind of just smacks her down by saying, stupid girl, do you truly think I need your help to find my mate? I have known him for years. So it turns out that what the Brabants are doing by fucking each other is just for entertainment. It's not really how these direwolves find their mate. And I have a suspicion, a sneaking suspicion, that Anasa's mate is Stark's direwolf. That's what I think. So obviously Maren wants the tea, so she wants to know, like, who is this direwolf? And of course Anasa doesn't tell her. She tells her, I will tell you who he is when you prove to me that you are worthy of the knowledge. You know, I really am enjoying Anasa. You know, I like the fact, listen, I do like Maren as a character. I think she's entertaining, but she also has some glaring flaws. I feel like she places judgment too soon. I feel like she's pretty self-involved. I feel like she feels like everybody is out to get her, which yes, in some ways that is true, but I feel like not everybody's out to get you. And I feel like she just doesn't do her due diligence to actually do some research. Like, she has her own theories, but she thinks that is the actual truth, and she will speak that as if it's the truth. And that is one thing I don't like about when people are like that. When they're both ignorant, but also very confident in their thoughts, in their feelings, in their statements, really. So yeah, but obviously I also like some things about her. I like that she's strong, that she is loyal, that she protects the people she loves. Like I said, I did talk about that. But I do like the fact that Anasa just clocks her tea and smacks her around whenever she needs it. I do enjoy that. So they end up actually compromising because Maren still wants her privacy when she's actually having sex. So they compromise that what Maren describes as like more of a translucent wall, in that Anasa can still feel, like, can still get access to Maren's feelings and like strong emotions, but like the details of whatever Maren is doing, Anasa will not be able to see and feel. And even though Anasa, it's clear that she's not really satisfied with that compromise, she relents because I don't know why, I actually don't. Then we get the purging trials, which I thought was pretty action-packed. Also, I feel like this book, it surprises me with how brutal it gets and how graphic it gets sometimes. And I felt like we saw that before, and I feel like I mentioned it before, but we do see that in the purging trials again. Of course, at first it seems like the pack is ganging up on Maren, and it seems like they want to kill her and Anasa, but then things switch around. So Anasa is fighting back, but then Anasa kind of takes over the lead, like she becomes the alpha, I guess, of this little pack, and they end up killing Periel because they feel like she is arrogant, which is a weakness, because she sows division within the pack, which, yes, that is true. So it was actually Periel that was marked for death before they entered the arena, and not Maren. So that was fun. And then Neva almost dies, which I don't know if I mentioned Neva because, I don't know, she is there. I felt like she was probably going to be a friend of the rest of them, but we haven't had a lot of scenes with her. She kept her distance. I feel like I did talk about it. Like her mate or the person she was with died on the mountain. So she's been grieving, but therefore she has not really been connected to the pack. But Isabel and Thomason do like her, and Maren also likes her. So at first Isabel and Thomason are trying to protect her, and then Maren thinks that she also wants to protect her, and Anasa agrees. So even though it's 4 against 18, the rest of the pack just kind of leaves Neva alone. So at the end of the purging trials, 20 bonded pairs remain standing from the Strategos pack. And then Maren finally has some sort of revelation. And obviously, and once again, like, it feels fitting for her character that she has this revelation when it comes to somebody else. And I do feel like what we're supposed to glean from this is that she also has this revelation about herself, but it's not really clearly stated in the text. She does say, when Anasa tells her that she doesn't regret any of the killings they did, and that Maren shouldn't either, but that she did choose well in coming to Neva's aid. Maren tells her, Neva would have done just fine without our help. Neva has an unbelievable strength to her. I only hope that she'll start to open up to the rest of us more now, that she'll realize that friendship can be a strength too. So yeah, Maren, how about you take your own advice? Anyway, so that was everything I want to talk about Anasa and the pack. I did like this storyline. Obviously, the book needed it because the whole point of this book is direwolves and the bonded. Before, I was kind of ambivalent toward Anasa. Obviously, I didn't know her. Now that we're finally getting to know her, I really like her as a character. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more between Anasa and Maren. In fact, like I said, I find that to be the more interesting relationship. Let's move on to the visions, because the visions, I feel like, also ramped up in this part. We got a lot of visions, and I still have no clue. I don't know. Like, Maren ends up asking Anasa about them. I'll get to it. Let's start. The first vision in this section starts on chapter 22. Maren is having a nightmare. She's in the medic's office with her mother, except the medic is treating Maren. The medic is saying, the delusions will start soon. Are you ready? And then her mother tells Maren, it's time for you to join me. The light changes until Mother is shrouded in darkness and the whites of her eyes turn a deep black. When she next opens her mouth, the voice that is coming out is nothing like my mother's. It's deep and otherworldly. Marin, come now, Nocturne demands it. Or Nocturne commands it. And then she wakes up. So yeah, that was vision number 1. Moving on. Okay, so when Marin is going through the tunnel to get to Killian's rooms, she gets deeper into the castle. And of course, we already had a scene where she was hearing voices. Where the arena is, it seemed like the visions were getting stronger. The shadows seem to move with a will of their own. Faint whispers echo off the walls, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. They're too faint to make out words, but they carry an unnerving thrum of energy that settles behind my eyes and leaves me dizzy. And because of those voices, she gets disoriented. And then she gets another vision of her mother speaking to ghosts. And she, like, genuinely thinks I'm gonna be like my mother, which, I mean, that is what's happening, of course. When she's disoriented, she comes across a tapestry carved directly into the stones, a woman astride a massive wolf, her face serene. Her head is adorned in an intricate crown composed of 2 direwolves leaping towards each other. And Anasa seems very curious and very interested in this tapestry, which I was thinking, okay, where, like, that seems familiar to me. The cover of book 2 actually has this particular crown. I'll leave a picture here. It is a crown composed of 2 direwolves leaping towards each other. So, yeah. That's all I have. Like I said, these visions confuse me. So she ends up passing out. Killian ends up finding her. When she asks him about this tapestry, he tells her that he's never seen that before, even though he knows about these tunnels and has been through them a lot of times. Another vision on chapter 27. She's in the castle, lost in maze-like corridors, and she hears her mother's voice calling to her to the arena, where she finds her mother dressed in a crimson gown, her head adorned in a twisting crown slick with blood. And when her mother turns around, her eyes are black as pitch, no whites, no pupil, just pure demonic black. Black blood pours from her lips and streams from her unseeing eyes. And then once again, Nocturne is calling, are you listening? So she wakes up in the arena and realizes that she has sleepwalked there. And while she is like lying there, she realizes that there's a drain to like remove all the blood and gore. And it's the exact same place she saw her mom in her nightmare. And she obviously freaks out because she's never sleepwalked before, and she knows that her mother has sleepwalked when she was in the throes of her delusions and her madness. Which, I mean, by now we know that's not what that is. And she actually thinks back on like when the episodes got worse, when she actually put herself in danger by sleepwalking. Like at one point she climbed up on the roof, and that was the day Marin finally took her to a healer and they started giving her sedatives. So yeah, she feels like obviously these visions are getting worse. She's sleepwalking now. She feels like her time is running out. Like even if these trials won't kill her, maybe her visions or what she thinks is like a mental illness will kill her. And she gets another vision at the most inopportune time when like she's supposed to connect with the rest of the direwolves when they are training to like become one and feel each other. And you know, I already talked about that in the last part. So when she leans in to try and connect, like get even closer to Anasa, the darkness creeps at the edge of her vision. And while she's trying to ignore them, she hears these voices and these words that she can't make out, and it feels deafening. She's trying to keep her balance as blood starts to seep down the walls around them, bright red against the cold sky. Like she sees so much blood that she thinks, how many people have died to produce this much blood? She ends up almost falling off Anasa, but Anasa ends up saving her. And of course, that also doesn't really help her in Stark's, like how Starks thinks of her and how the rest of the pack thinks of her. So because that happened, she does end up asking Anasa if she sensed what happened. Anasa did. And Marin asks her if she can stop it, and she says, no, I cannot, and moreover, I would not. Visions like the ones you are experiencing are powerful. They may mean something, which obviously that has been my theory from the start. And then Anasa gives her like some tips. Anasa thinks that the reason she had that vision is because her mind was wandering. So the next time they have to connect in a pivotal time, Marin just needs to keep like concentrating on that. The last vision in this part happens after Maren has sex with Killian, and she hears this scream, and then she wakes him up because she actually thought somebody was screaming and he didn't hear anything. So yeah, I don't know what I can say about these visions that I haven't already said. They confuse me. And once again, I feel like it's too repetitive. How many vision scenes are we gonna get? I don't feel like it adds anything. I feel like we definitely could have gone less scenes. Like, this is just, I don't know. Maybe it will all come together at the end and I'll retroactively will be happy with all these scenes. I don't think we needed all these different vision scenes. I just don't. Like, only in this part, which is about 100 pages, we had about 6 of them. And like I said, I don't feel like any of them are that different. I feel like some of them could have been combined. Some of them could have been just edited out. Anyway, moving on to the Nabbers portion, which wasn't a lot, but we did make some progress. So you know how the Bonded didn't know about the Nabbers? It turns out that it's not just the Bonded who don't know about them. It's also different commoners from different places in this country. Because when Maren asks Henry about them, he also has no idea what a Nabber is. So it seems to only be happening in Sturmfrost. And we find out that that may actually be the case because Killian ends up finding a Nabber. Oh, that is also a brutal scene. That is what I was thinking. I was like, a lot of brutal things happened, yes. Okay, so if there's one thing I hate reading about is if there's a torture scene where somebody gets their fingernails ripped off. That just sends shivers down my spine, and that happened here. So Killian tells Maren that they found a Nabber, so of course she wants to speak to him. He's not speaking, so Killian ends up torturing him by ripping off his fingernails to get him to speak. And he tells them that he's just a man from the slums in the southern quarter. Basically, for money, has been stealing these kids and delivering them to somebody who wore a mask. He claims these children are alive when he leaves them. He claims he's never hurt them. And he also claims that he doesn't know anything about Sayla. He's not the one who, like, kidnapped her. He does end up giving them the names of his accomplices, who are his brother and the rest of their friends. And he does say that the masked person takes them and moves them out of the city. Okay, so I do find this side of Killian interesting because so far we haven't seen that side of him. We've only seen yes, he's a bit dominant in the bedroom, but other than that, he seems to be sweet. And yes, he's a liar, obviously, but other than that, when he interacts with Maren or when they were still in their quarter, he seemed to be she seemed to be the one who was vicious, brutal, who was a fighter, and he seemed to be too soft for all of it, which I have to tell you, and we'll get to that when we talk about their romantic relationship. I'm a bit conflicted about Killian. Like I said, I'll talk about that later. Let's talk about 2 world building things we found out about. Maren and Henry are the only 2 bonded, not from bonded families, so they end up getting a private lesson from Aldrich. Okay, so we find out more about pack dynamics. Deimos are known for their viciousness and battle prowess. Their bonded tend to be large and temperamental. Their wolves even more so, which of course that is the pack that Stark belongs to. Thylax are the guardians. They learn to blend in alongside all the other packs, support them and protect them. Strategos are tacticians and leaders, masters of strategy. They have to learn to cooperate with the rest, which is ironic considering who Maren is. And she finds it ironic as well. And then the Kryptos, the Shadow Walkers, they specialize in strength and intelligence training. Sigrid Terion, who is the Sovereign Alpha. She is Stark's mother, and she serves as the king's second in command. The Sovereign Alpha is not chosen, it is a family line. The Therions have been the crown's sworn protectors for as long as anyone can remember. Which of course means that after his mom dies, Stark will be the Sovereign Alpha. We find out more about the king and why he, even though he's not bonded to a wolf, why he maintains ultimate control. The king's role is to ensure that the commoners he reigns over always have an equal balance of power between the bonded and the direwolves. So while Sigrid is the highest in power for the bonded, we ultimately all answer to the king. And then he talks more about the telepathic communication between the packs and how that works. So of course you can communicate with your own wolf telepathically and ultimately with your own pack. You cannot really communicate between packs unless some wolves are mated. I'll talk about that later. So the sovereign alpha is basically the key to communicate between the packs. She's essentially a conduit. Think of her like a translator. There's obviously the sovereign alpha. Then there are alphas of every pack. Then every pack has beta, a beta, and then a gamma. And then there are the regular bonded and the raw bonds. And then he talks more about like the politics, I guess, of the dire wolves and they're bonded. And that explanation happens after Maren asks why Stark is there when he has such a high-ranking position. Like, why is he here and not on the front lines? So it turns out Deimos and Strategos often vie for dominance. So, of course, to have, like, the alpha of the Deimos will give him influence over, like, the newest pack members. And then we find out that the Kryptos operate more independently, which makes sense, considering they're the spies, right? Yeah. And the Phylax maintain careful neutrality in most matters, which also makes sense considering they are like the bodyguards, right? Yeah, the guardians. Maren asks if wolves ever rejected their chosen riders after the fact. And she finds out that that hasn't really happened because once the bond is formed, there's like a very small time in the beginning where a bond can be severed without it affecting the direwolf. But once the bond has been there for a while, it will kill the direwolf. And then he talks about the mate bonds, and that is like the only way you can communicate between packs, which is why it's so special, because you don't need the sovereign to communicate between packs if you have a mated pair that are not in the same pack. You find out more about the Siphons. In the Siphons country, there are no humans left. They drain them all for power. That's why they invade the Nocturna lands to find more prey. The Siphons subsist on the spoils of war. They feed on our captured soldiers. And they also use the blood of their captives to wield powerful blood magic to control their minds and weave illusions. That's why the war has gone on so long. Through their blood magic, Siphons have achieved functional immortality and the ability to manipulate human perception. This is how they infiltrate our borders and defend against our bonded attacks. The older the Siphon is, the more powerful their abilities become. We don't even know half of what they're truly capable of. As we interact primarily with our youngest soldiers, the more senior Siphons are rarely part of their forward guard. Okay, so Killian and / Stark, because we barely got any Stark scenes really. So yeah, let's actually talk through these scenes and then I'll give you my opinions. In chapter 21, Killian is waiting for Maren in her rooms. It seems like he just wants to heal her like the good old times. Like there's a caretaking scene and she still is attracted to him. And she actually ends up questioning him, saying, you know, how can you sit by and let your father treat people the way he is? And he tells her, when I'm king, everything will change. And if, you know, you give me a chance, I'll tell you more about it. And she says, you know, why would you want to be with me? You're a prince. I'm a lowly commoner. He tells her that she's precious to him. He, of course, already told her that he would give up everything for her. And then he tells her about this secret passageway that I already talked about, this tunnel that leads from her room directly to his room, and that she can visit him anytime. We get this scene with Maren's friends lusting after Stark, like at this party, which we've already seen that a lot of people find him very attractive. And of course, while they're looking at him, he seems to be staring at Maren. And then they have this interaction where he tells her that she has to, that she better brace herself, not drink so much. And he tells her wouldn't want you stumbling off somewhere dangerous where accidents could happen. So of course she sees it like he's threatening that an accident will happen and that he'll kill her. You know my thoughts about that. I don't think that's the case. I think she's not interpreting what he's saying correctly, which partly is his fault, really. But, you know, she kind of threatens him in return, you know, that the accidents don't happen to her. She's the one that causes accidents. That and the scene I talked about in the Anasa section were the only two real scenes we got with Stark. We do get two sex scenes between Meryn and Killian. And I do have to say, while I was reading it, I was really into those scenes. I'm not gonna lie, they're very well written. And I was just blushing and kind of like almost giggling and kicking my feet. Now, however, now that I think about it, I just don't trust Killian. But I'm just so confused about these scenes. Why are they so detailed? And then the chapter ends after the purging trial, and Meryn and Killian are acting the fools because she looks at him in the stands and both of them are like smiling to each other. And of course, Stark notices. So that's gonna be a storyline, of course. Let's talk about this whole Killian thing. So like I said, I did enjoy it. Like I do think, like in a different book, I would totally be shipping them because I do like him, which scares me. So I think it could go in two ways. And I feel like, okay, so the one way is, because it's clear that Stark is obviously the one, like the love interest or a love interest, because I feel like, okay, maybe this is a why choose. That could happen. Okay, I would be into that this would turn into a why choose. Not in this book necessarily, but maybe in later books. I just feel like, why put in so much detail about a character she's not going to end up with? That could be the other theory, that he turns out to be evil. He's just messing with her, and the betrayal of that will hit that much harder if we actually saw in detail how he took advantage of her, really. That is my second theory. Those two things, I feel like, and I feel like my second theory is the one that's gonna happen. I feel like he's gonna end up betraying her because he already betrayed her. He already proved to be a liar. But I'm not gonna lie, as I'm like these scenes, I am liking them. But once again, that also leans into the repetitiveness of it. We already know he's probably not gonna be endgame. So why do we need two in detail long sex scenes between them? That alongside all those visions we got that were very repetitive, plus the fact that it took this long for Meryn and Anasa to finally talk to each other, and the fact that this is a pretty long book, it's starting to bother me. Like with some of the scenes, I find myself that I cannot stop reading. But if I really zoom out and look at what has happened, right now, I'm on page 300. 300, that's almost an entire book. And what has really happened so far? If we, like, the only interesting things are the trials, the relationship between Anasa and Meryn. And I do really like all the friendship scenes. But other than that, I feel like we could have gotten every important thing in 200 pages. I feel like everything I read so far could have been told in 200 pages as opposed to 300 pages. Like I feel like we could have used 100 less pages to tell the same story. Maybe I'm being harsh, and it's not that I'm not enjoying it. I am enjoying it. And I just say the audiobook is helping with that because the audiobook is a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. But like even if I didn't have the audiobook, there are a lot of things I do enjoy about this book, which frustrates me even more, that it gets bogged down with extra pages and extra repetitive scenes that I feel like are not necessary. But obviously I cannot actually say that because I still have so much book left to read. So maybe I'll come back with my tail between my legs at the end and tell you this was 5 stars, everything makes sense, Sable Sorensen is a genius. Maybe. I did find out that Sable Sorensen are 2 authors, actually. I did not realize. Anyway, and like I said, I'm just confused about Killian. Like, I want to know, are you evil or can I just root for this romance? So yeah, I think those are my thoughts. Alrighty, do I have any other places to film? Yes, I do. Will I be going there in this video? No, I won't. I am still not feeling too well. I had plans this entire weekend. I canceled all my plans. So here I am reading Direbound. Not as fast as I wanted to, but it doesn't really matter, really. I just finished chapter 39, so let's recap chapter 31 through 39. And I did like the way I structured it in the last update, so I'm gonna do that again here. Although, having said that, there are still some subplots, but most of this chapter revolved around pack dynamics and Meryn's own journey. And I do have to say, we're getting more Stark scenes, which I like that because I had an epiphany after my last update. I don't even remember what I told you in the update, but I am really starting to not trust Killian. Like in the beginning, I was enjoying it because, and I'm not gonna lie, a part of that had to do with the fact that I do feel like the sex scenes are written well. So I am into, I say that, but their last sex scene I wasn't that into. But before that, I mean, he does all the things I like in an MMC. Like, he calls her mine, he orders her around, he calls her a good girl. I mean, I like those things, I'm not gonna lie. But, I don't know. Some things that happen in the last section and also in this section, I am really just starting to side-eye him. And maybe that's the point. Okay, maybe I have not been giving Sable Sorensen enough credit because maybe I'm falling for the trap they are laying out. Anyway, moving on. I'm gonna just start with the biggest plot lines, which is like the pack dynamics and Marin's journey, I guess. We start off right after the purging trials, of course. And we find out that, I don't know if I said in the last update, but 3 of the Strategos pack were cold. And Marin ends up getting another tattoo, which I'll get to that in the Stark section more in detail. But the reason she gets that tattoo is because she literally gave out the order when Anasa decided that, like, when Anasa informed her that it was, what's her name? Periel? I already forgot. Yeah, Periel died. Well, I had to die. We get a cute Isabel scene, and I feel like it's laying the groundwork for what's gonna happen later. But everybody's very excited to go back home, except for Marin, and Isabel seems to realize it's because obviously Marin's mother is mentally ill. Marin doesn't know like what she's gonna find when she gets home. Isabel comforts her, and they talk about the ball later that evening. I really like that scene between them. And then we get the chapters of Marin going back home with Anasa, and suddenly she's the bonded who she has judged in the past. And I do like that. I do feel like in this section, there are a couple scenes where Marin realizes that she might have been too judgy and she feels ashamed for her previous thoughts. I like that because I feel like we haven't really got that from Marin's own accord. Like before, Marin realized, okay, maybe I was wrong about stuff because other people told her she was wrong. And I feel like in this section, not all the time, but there are some instances where Marin herself comes to these realizations. So I do like that. And now, of course, she's always judged these bonded and their direwolves for, like, obviously they're very big. So she had these thoughts that they were callous and didn't care about these commoners. And now that she can actually hear Anasa's thoughts, she realized, wait, Anasa is like trying to avoid collision, stuff like that. And we get a reunion with Marin's mother. And Marin's mother seems to be very lucid all of a sudden. Which on the one hand, so that is like obviously I think because Marin is getting these visions, it means her mother's no longer getting them. But I still find it odd how happy her mom is considering one of her daughters has been kidnapped and the other has gone off to participate in these very dangerous trials. So I'm side-eyeing that a bit. But it is nice for Marin to finally see her mother be so clear-eyed. Also, there is an interesting thing happening. Okay, so Marin's mother meets Anasa, of course. And Anasa behaves pretty strangely. She bows to Marin's mom. And when Marin questions her about that, because she doesn't even bow to the king, Anasa tells her, I give respect where respect is due. Marin's mom actually apologizes for not being the mom that she was supposed to be, and Marin tells her that it isn't her fault that she's been ill. So I do like that conversation between them. And then we see Igor. So yeah, there's a reunion with Marin, Igor, and her mom, and I do like that reunion between them. So Marin's mom gives her this pendant, which Anasa is very interested in, or seems to be interested in. So it's beautiful, but it's also very old. And when she touches it, it feels unnaturally warm, almost alive. When Marin asks Anasa why she's so interested in this necklace, Anasa doesn't answer her. So this necklace must be something important. When Marin leaves, it feels like a goodbye for her. Before the ball, Marin has another realization that she, like for the first time, she actually wants to belong in this pack. She wants to earn the respect of the raw bonds. It's not just, oh, I want to survive this so I can get to Sale. I mean, obviously that's still her goal, but she actually wants to be a part of this pack. So, I mean, finally, this is page 328. So anyway, but good for her that she finally realized that. So then we get the ball, which that is more romance things that I will go more in detail in those sections. But what does happen that I'll just talk about here briefly is she once again shuts down her connection between her and Anasa when she's having sex with Killian. And when she lets Anasa back in, she realizes that something horrible has happened and that the pack is grieving. And when she's trying to get answers, Anasa just smacks her around because she tells her, while your pack suffered, you blocked us out for human pleasure. You know, I feel like I'm a bit harsh on Maren sometimes. It's not that I don't like her, it's just sometimes she does, like, she is selfish, she is self-involved. I'll talk more about that at the end of my recap. So I feel like she needs somebody like Anasa to block her tea when she needs it. So yeah, I did enjoy that, even though obviously, I mean, it's also Maren's right to not want her direwolf to watch her have sex. I mean, that is also her right. So the rest of the pack is also pretty annoyed with Maren because during the ball, she did tell everybody that she belongs to Killian, so now everybody knows. So that is going to have some ramifications. Maren does find out that the Stratego's alpha was killed. His name was Marcos. We don't know him, so I don't really care. Edith is also kind of upset with Maren, and she also kind of tells her the same thing that Anasa told her. I already gave the pack a full debrief. You missed it. I guess you were busy entertaining royals, which of course they don't really know the relationship between her and Killian. They think she was just chosen by him during the trials. Or yeah, and now she's just entertaining him like that other raw bond is doing with the king, which I feel like that is a bit unfair because, I mean, obviously I know her relationship with Killian, but even if that wasn't the case, isn't that how you guys operate? Like, how can you be mad at her for also sleeping with, like, the prince when this other Raubon is sleeping with the king, and that has happened for years? And like, these Raubons are looking forward to it. Like, we've had conversations of Raubons like dressing skimpily so they can attract the attention of a royal or like a king. So I don't know. I feel like Anasa is right to be upset, and I feel like Isabel is right for being upset. I just don't feel like the rest of the pack really has any leg to stand on. But then on the other hand, of course, I mean, Maren has already been warned that there could be consequences for her closing down the bond. Anyway, I think I've said enough about that. So we see the pack mourning Marcos because, of course, Maren didn't know him, but the rest of the pack, you know, grew up with him. They know him. And, of course, he was the alpha. The rest of the pack is still upset with Maren, and Isabel is very upset with Maren. She doesn't speak to her. Eventually, they end up fighting each other. And Isabel, who normally takes it easy with Maren, is not taking it easy. So they finally have like a heart-to-heart. So obviously Maren, once again, comes to the wrong conclusion. And Isabel tells her, no, I'm hurt. You hurt me. You've been hiding this relationship from me for months. I understand not wanting all the Raubons to know, but I'm your friend. Or at least I thought I was, but clearly not if you can't trust me with the truth about whom you're seeing. Which, once again, I mean, even though I do like this scene and it leads to like a stronger relationship with both of them, on the other hand, I mean, and I get it. Obviously, Isabel has a right to be upset. They were friends. In fact, we just saw a scene of her being a very good friend to Maren, of her knowing intimate details about Maren's life, about her family life. So obviously, it hurts that Maren never told her who she was seeing. But then on the other hand, Isabel has known that Maren has been seeing someone and she hasn't really pried. So then, I don't know, like, what makes you this upset now that you know it was the prince? Because you knew she was involved with somebody from the castle. But I mean, like I said, I don't want to talk about it too much because, I mean, she has a right to be upset. I do feel like that is true. Maren feels bad and she does end up finding Isabel, who has been avoiding her. So she ends up explaining that there were two reasons why she never really told her. And the first is that she's never really had friends, so she doesn't know how to be a friend. And she also wasn't sure about this relationship. And then she finally tells her, this isn't just, like, I didn't just meet him here. We've been dating for a year. So I did like that scene between them. And then something ridiculous happens that I still find a bit funny. Maren ends up being the alpha. That is just hilarious to me. Like, what the fuck? Like, what makes her qualified? Which I'm not the only one who thinks that. Maren thinks that too. So the sovereign alpha comes to the castle after the death of the Strategos alpha. So Sigrid Terion. And she wants to meet with Maren. And Maren, of course, because always her first thought is somebody's gonna kill me. She thinks that the sovereign alpha is gonna kill her for sleeping with the prince. No, that's not it. She thinks she's gonna get killed for shutting down her fellow Rawbonds. So this is like, Maren is very embarrassing sometimes. So Maren is trying to explain to the sovereign alpha about her relationship with the prince. They've been seeing each other, and Sigrid is like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then she actually tells her, I'm not here to talk about your love life, you child. Which, that is just the truth, okay? Clock her tea. Tell her. But then my respect for her kind of crumbles when she says, the Strategos direwolves have convened and chosen their next leader, Anassa. You are the Strategos alpha. So, I mean, to be fair to her, she does say to Anassa and not to Maren. But of course, that means that Maren is also the Strategos alpha. And I do understand why Anassa has been chosen, because obviously she's like this old, powerful direwolf. We have seen her lead during the culling trial. But then another part of me is like, you couldn't have found anybody else. And also like the Strategos pack. Those are literally the leaders. So the leader of the leaders, you couldn't find anybody else but Maren. Anyway, so Maren says some dumb thing, but one I agree with her, because she does say there has been some mistake. I'm just a raw bond. I don't even come from a bonded family. And then Sigrid says, do you accuse the direwolves of making a mistake in choosing their leaders? This is not a debate. The wolves have convened, they have chosen, and Anassa will lead Strategos, which means you as her rider will serve as Strategos alpha. Then Sigrid shows up, who was the beta, of course, so everybody kind of assumed that Sigrid was gonna be the alpha. So, of course, she's flabbergasted when she hears the truth. So she says that it's unprecedented. And Sigrid also kind of agrees with her. You know, technically, Maren is supposed to go to the war front and lead there when she's still in training. Sigrid ends up asking Maren, okay, so you're alpha, what would you have us do? So Maren smartly does say, let's have Edith lead the war front in my stead until I finish my training, which, I mean, that is a good decision. And then Maren will stay here to continue the trials, but also to learn how to be an alpha. And of course, there's only one person who can teach her, because there's only one other alpha at the castle. Maren ends up having a private conversation with Anassa, and she's like, congratulations for being chosen to lead our pack. And Anassa tells her, it's not just me who was chosen. The other direwolf chose us as a pair. A direwolf's individual ability is meaningful, but even the strongest among us is weak without a paired rider to guide our powers. You were born to lead, girl. Whether or not you believe that is of no consequence anymore. You must, so you will. Girl! Maren apologizes for shutting Anassa out so thoroughly it won't happen again. And then Anassa says, I know. And then Maren has to tell her fellow Rawbonds that she now, even though she's also still a Rawbond, is also alpha of the Strategos pack. So that doesn't really go over too well. So Anassa shuts their bickering down, which that was very cool. So obviously she has this new power. Normally within a pack you can sense emotions and touches of thought from everyone else. but obviously the alpha can speak into everyone's mind at once. The rest of the pack really has no choice but to accept this, of course. The Rawbonds also kind of question her, saying, we might not question the direwolves and their choices, but how can we trust you when you're in a relationship with the crown prince? How can we trust that you'll do what's right for the bonded and not just what's right for the crown? And then Stark comes to Marin's defense and he says, what's right for the crown is always what's right for the bonded. So, you know, that also kind of shuts everybody up. So he does say the alpha's time is too valuable to waste on pointless questions. And he tells Marin that they will be starting training tomorrow. So we get them training, which I'm going to talk about that in the Stark chapters because, you know, obviously it's a training sequence and some of those turn hot. So if anything important is revealed about like the pack or about the alpha or being alpha, I will mention it here. Otherwise, I'll leave it to the Stark section. So the training has changed now after the purging trials. Now all the different packs are training together. And of course that means that she has to train with Jonah. So Jonah is a piece of shit, of course. Even though Marin is now an alpha, Jonah doesn't care. He ends up attacking her, which ends up with her falling off Anassa and him and his werewolf attacking her while she's down on the ground. She ends up breaking her nose. And then there's a rush of wind as if death just streaked past me and only narrowly left me breathing. The sheer power I just felt like a glimpse of something primordial. I believe that is Stark's powers because Stark ends up yelling at Jonah, you do not touch an alpha that way. And he tells him, she's not my alpha, which that is not what he said. Can you not hear? And then he tells him, touch her and I'll kill you. Because he says, you're a powerful Rawbond, but strength is not the only thing we value in Deimos. You do well to remember that if you want to make it through the rest of proving. And in case my implication is not crystal fucking clear, you touch her again and I'll call you myself. I'm just here on the sidelines cheering him on, okay? And that was so hot, I'm not gonna lie. Also, Marin is kind of having an issue with her gamma. Because technically he's supposed to be her instructor, but also she's his alpha. So whenever he has to train them, he doesn't want to give her any orders when she needs orders to learn. So that is an issue that she has to deal with, really. Stark also ends up telling her that she needs to deal with that. He tells her that she needs to get used to giving him instructions. Tell him what you need and be clear about it. Do not expect him to lead you or the rest of the pack, not while you're around. So like she needs to actually lead, and then she thinks, okay, so I used to lead the laundry back home because she used to work in the laundry. And even though she was like one of the younger ones, she was leading them. I think what he means by that is like she needs to make it clear when we're in training, like to her gamma. She needs to make it clear when we're training, you do the training. And even though I'm your alpha, you still have to give me instructions. So yeah. Moving on to the visions. Thankfully, we only had one vision in these 100 pages. Thank the Lord. So she ends up falling asleep. She once again has been like sleepwalking, I guess. So she's again at the very center of the arena floor, but something is slightly different. The usual disorientation that takes me during these episodes is absent, replaced by unsettling clarity. Her shadow doesn't seem to be moving with her, but then when she looks again, it does. She finds something metallic, gold. Beside that glint of metal, there's a shimmering stone, opalescent, the curve of a wolf's head. And she wants to stick her arm somewhere, but then she hears voices and leaves. And this chapter ends with her thinking, why, as I flee through the halls, does it seem like death is on my heels? And she also has questions like, what is buried beneath the arena floor? Why does it feel like it's drawing me in? So yeah, I don't know, girl. I have no idea. Okay, my next section is revolution, ? Because I do feel like Marin is thinking about revolution. I think the direwolves are thinking about revolution, or at least Anassa is. Let me go through them. The first one is when Marin is on Anassa coming back home. She obviously, was thinking about, okay, so everybody here hates the bonded, they resent the bonded, and she thinks the bonded is not the people you should be hating. it should be the king. Like, you should resent the king. She thinks the thought is disloyal, treasonous even. Our people can't even win a war. We'd never survive a revolution. But then she thinks about Killian. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a revolution. If the king dies, then Killian can take over, and she thinks obviously that Killian is a better man. And then she actually, once again, the treasonous voice is back. Why wait for the king's natural death when there's someone more fit to rule the throne? And Anasa says there is, which, of course, Maren thinks. Anasa agrees with me. It has to be Killian, when I don't think that's the case. I think Anasa thinks of somebody else entirely different. So that's funny, this misunderstanding between them. So during the ball, Maren also has this thought of the relationship between the bonded and the actual elites. And she comes to this realization by looking at like the different clothing. So obviously the bonded wear like more skimpy clothing. Elites wear these extravagant outfits which are more modest and more expensive looking. So she thinks the bonded are just beautiful, violent dolls for the actual elite. Girl, why does this just feel like real life sometimes? After Maren sleeps with Killian, she almost gets this vision, and then she thinks, why not just ask Killian about what is hidden underneath the arena? And he tells her that he doesn't know. But she does realize something in his tone makes her question something. Not him, but I don't know. I feel like that was a clue. And once again, she thinks about the fact that she hates his dad and that Killian could be a better king. So not a lot there to mine, but, it has been mentioned enough times that I feel like, obviously, it could be relevant. Moving on to the Stark chapters, because there were a lot. There were more Stark chapters here than Killian chapters. So after the purging trial, Stark comes into her room and gives her another tattoo. Miss Everything is always only about me actually voices the thought, do I alone get the good fortune of a tattoo? Bitch, why would you think that? He tells her, you're my fourth visit tonight. But then she actually gets this thought that is pretty, interesting. Because she ends up asking him for another tattoo for that nabber that she killed, of course. And she thinks, I might save my sister, but at what cost? Her life matters to me. It's all that matters to me. Yet is it worth so many other lives in exchange? This is the second person I've killed since I've been here. Third, actually, counting the nabber. 3 deaths on my hand. Who am I to say that she matters more? Which, isn't that just the God-honest truth? That happens all the time, where in revenge, you might actually murder more people. And it's fine if they're evil, of course, but if innocent people get hurt in the crossfire because you want to save somebody else you love, like somebody you love, like isn't that, like there's this ethical experiment, right? Like this dilemma. Would you save one person you love if you have to sacrifice 10 strangers? That's a difficult question to answer. Anyway, I didn't think I'd get so philosophical on you. Moving on, that obviously, like this scene obviously was hot. I mean, he gives her a tattoo, he licks her. I mean, what do you want me to say? Then they actually have an interesting conversation about these tattoos, because once again, Maren, her preconceived notions about these people is always bad. So when she calls these tattoos trophies, he tells her these aren't trophies, they're reminders. We cannot afford to forget the sacrifices we make. Every life we've had to take to maintain the pack's strength. Every person who didn't make it. Every loss is recorded in our flesh, so we never forget the price of survival. No one wants these tattoos, princess. There's no place for pride in war. Let's talk about this ball. So Stark, she sees Stark, who of course is so handsome and beautiful and gorgeous. And, she actually has to actively remind herself when she's lusting after Stark that she's not here for Stark, okay? She's here for Killian. Don't you forget it. But then this lecherous pair of noble people wants to, fuck her. So somebody ends up saving her. She thinks it's Killian, but it's actually Stark. He wants to talk to her, so he asks her to dance. And it's not really a question. So they end up dancing. And while they're dancing, so she is wearing the necklace her mom gave her. And he notices and tells her, interesting necklace. Something so opulent on a commoner might draw the wrong kind of attention. Where'd you get it? So now both Anasa and Stark are interested in this random necklace. And he tells her, well then, you might want to read up on the history of that kind of opal before you start parading it around. So there's something about this opal that is important. And then they get interrupted by Killian, who wants to dance with her. And this is like the classic love triangle scene where Stark doesn't really want to let her go. So Stark actually tells her the lady is spoken for. Wow, okay. Meryn ends up telling everybody that she belongs to Prince Killian. So yeah, there's that. When Meryn gets to Stark's office to train with him after she became the Alpha, she finds out that his office is basically a big library, which, yes. Like, you were already my dream man. No, that's actually not true, but I mean, he's obviously hot and now he reads. Yes! So he actually does tell her, what did you think I only fought? Being an alpha means more than just fighting. And then they end up fighting, which she's actually a good fighter, but he's a better fighter. Like fighting as in he's training her. Listen, I need to make you listen to the audiobook because it's important, okay? So they talk about why the packs are separated from one another. Stark tells her it's because of the fact that every pack has its weakness. Strategos are intelligent, but their reaction times are often slowed by the information they must constantly process. Phylax are physically formidable, but they're less maneuverable than Deimos. And then she asks, and your pack's weakness? And this is what he tells her. And let me just play you this clip because it was so hot.
Deimos got carried away.
He rasps. The breathlessness in his voice and the way his...
Stop. That was so hot. So anyway, that was, I feel like, very important to share. So, and then he says, you know, every soldier has weaknesses and strength. And then he says, you're an alpha. You are not permitted the luxury of open weakness. And when she says, you know, that doesn't make any sense. Everybody has weakness. He says, you're right, but we are selective about whom we show those weaknesses to. And then they fight again. And during the fight, he ends up pushing her up against a shelf, which, yes, that was hot. Okay, it just was. And then he tells her, write down everything you need to improve, and then we'll work on that. And then she tells him, but I'm not supposed to show any weakness, right? No, she says, you mean I should tell you all my weakness? And then she makes him laugh with that comment. So, yeah. I like their dynamic now. They end up making this list. She tells him, why don't you tell me what an alpha needs, and I'll tell you if I need to improve on that. So this was a nice, like, I did really like this scene between them. She is very, like, attracted to some books that are on his shelves. She feels like they're almost alive, and he tells her, those are books that have passed through my family line. They are not mine to loan, but if you find yourself drawn to any of them and happen to pick them up while not looking, I won't stop you. And Anasa seems very interested in that idea. So far that hasn't really gone anywhere. She hasn't actually stolen one of his books. So after he saves her from Jonah, they go to his office and she tells him, I'm a shit alpha, and he says yes. And when she gets offended, he tells her, I would never lie to you. And then he makes her look at herself and her nose is really broken, and, you know, and she gets kind of upset that her nose is now not as pretty as it used to be. So he tells her that he can fix it, but it will hurt. She says, hurt me then, Alpha Stark. Okay. So he ends up breaking her nose again, and then Anasa heals it again for her. But he does that between her legs, which, I mean, that all just turns her on, which, I mean, I don't blame her. I really don't. Like, I cannot blame her. So another training sequence between them where she finally gets the upper hand. What can I even say about that? Anyway, it ends up with her pussy on his face. Like, I don't know how else to describe that, but that is how it happens. I mean, still clothes, of course. But that all turns her on so much that she finally has sex with Killian again. So, yeah, interesting dynamics here. It feels now that she is kind of using Killian to get out her pent-up frustration and pent-up feelings about Stark. So that is where the story is going. So let's talk about Killian and Marin, which I feel like I already talked about it while discussing other things. Oh yeah, so after Marin tells everybody that they're together, Killian wants her to meet the king for the first time officially as his girlfriend, I guess. So the king is obviously a disgusting asshole. He seemed to be kind of turned on by the fact that Marin killed Periel. So that was fucking disgusting. But he does seem to approve of his son dating her. So, and there's that. I don't really care about this king. When Marin talks to Killian about the fact that his father is an asshole and that, you know, about the bloodshed, stuff like that, Killian tells her, my father's bloodthirsty nature is precisely why things must change. I want to change it. The current system, all the bloodshed, the cruelty, I want to believe that there's a way to fix it. With the right ruler at the helm, one who doesn't view death as a form of entertainment. And then she tells him, you could be that ruler. And he tells her, I could be that ruler and you could be by my side. So I still have confusing feelings about Killian because on the one hand, he says all the right things. But then because of reasons, I just don't know if I can trust him. So they do end up sleeping together, which, I mean, that results in her whole pack hating her. So that was not a good experience for them. So they didn't really, I mean, they still saw each other, but they didn't really sleep together again until she couldn't really hold herself back anymore after spending so much time with Stark. Then actually she has a fruitful conversation with Anasa because when she decides, okay, I want to sleep with Killian, this time she decides to do things differently. So she asks Anasa, can I please have some privacy? I won't block you out if you think I can't do it correctly, but maybe you can put the wall up from your end in a way that is satisfactory for you. After thinking about it, Anasa tells her fine, and she does end up putting that wall between them. So, I mean, that is, I guess, a good way for both of them to get what they want. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Nabbers, because Marin finds out that the attacks that she thought were stopped because Killian told her that they were going to stop them, because of course they found this Nabber. He told them where they could find all the other Nabbers, so now the attack should have stopped. Right? Wrong. In fact, Igor tells her that the attacks have increased. So she does end up asking Killian about it, and he seems surprised that there have been more attacks, which I find odd because isn't he supposed to look after, I don't know. I find it strange that he didn't know that there were more attacks. Okay, so this is what she actually says. Killian presses his lips into a tight line, obviously distressed at what I've discovered. I think he's distressed that she found out and is questioning him about it. That's what I think. So he says, shit, I thought we cleared them out. Okay, I'll triple the amount of guards in the city. If there are more at work, we'll catch them. I promise you. You know, if Killian turns out to be innocent and just a good guy, I'm gonna feel so bad. This section ends with Marin getting a message from the front from Edith. And it says, we may have located the missing children. Bum, bum, bum. So yeah, that I think is gonna take up a good amount of the next section, but obviously I've not started it yet. Okay, so some repetitive things were left out, of course. We didn't get as many vision scenes, but we did get maybe more training scenes than were necessary. I mean, of course, since I know, like, it's clear that there's something between her and Stark. So I get it, like we've been deprived of that as of this point, so we need more like interactions between them. It's not necessarily the training montages themselves, because obviously we kind of need that for like this relationship development. But we've had at least 2 or 3 instances where Marin is thinking the exact same thing after one of those training sequences. Then just cut it out, just edit it out. It wasn't necessary. And I do feel like I find myself, sorry, if my nose is red, I had to blow my nose because I was leaking. That was so gross, sorry. I am getting tired of how self-centered Marin is. But then on the other hand, since she now all of a sudden is the alpha It seems like everything is about her. So tell me everything is not about me, but what if it is? Okay. But it's still annoying because not all the time is Marin right about the fact that everything is about her. You know, she thought for chapters and chapters that Stark wanted to kill her. When she meets with the Sovereign Alpha, she thinks that she came all the way to the castle just to kill her for having a relationship with Killian. I mean, are you delusional? Are you actually delusional? So that happened, like that is happening one too many times by this point. So I really hope now that she's actually alpha and has a leadership role, she will not be so stupid and not think these dumb thoughts. I did like in these 100 pages that we did get more about Stark. I did like most of their interactions together. And I also like, if Killian is not going to be endgame, I like that we got less of Killian because of that. And I also like the fact that we didn't get as many vision scenes. I think it's clear from the way I'm speaking about this book that this is probably not going to get 5 stars for me. Right now, I am 69%. I'm 69% in. I did not do that on purpose. No, I did not. So about 30% left. I still have the same issues I had before. I feel like still it's too repetitive. I feel like it's too long. Marin, even though she has some aspects of her I love, she is annoying sometimes. And some things that are happening, I just can't take serious. Like, why, like, the whole her being alpha thing right now? I know she's the main character, I get that. But did she have to become alpha in book 1 when she's still training? Like, I feel like they're doing too much. So I'm gonna continue. Alrighty, this is gonna be the second to last part, which is a bit less than 100 pages, but the last 2 parts are equally divided. I will be recapping chapter 40 through 49. Let's talk about the Siphon / Finding Sayla plotline, because obviously that is where we start and that is where we left off the last section. So Marin wants to go to the warfront to find Sayla, but then she gets intercepted by Stark, which I think that Anasa is a little spy and she keeps, like, she's communicating with Stark, because did I say I do believe Anasa and Stark's direwolf are mates. So yeah, I think these two are working together. It becomes abundantly clear in this chapter, in my opinion. She tells him, I'm going to Grunfall, and he tells her that he's going with her, which of course she doesn't want, but Anasa kind of takes his side. So she reluctantly agrees that he will come with her. Lots of things ensue, which I'll get to most of that in the Stark section. Of course, while they are writing, Stark keeps looking at her and she, of course, thinks that he hates her still. And then Anasa is kind of offended on Stark's behalf and she tells her, be grateful, you do not understand the dangers ahead. It is dumb for her to go by herself, obviously, like she's still in training. She's not totally alone, she has Anasa, but obviously Stark has been at the warfront for years at this point. So how about shut up and let's get to it, really. You know, to be fair to her, she does come around quite quickly when she realizes that he is there to help her. When they get to Grunfall, we find out that eons ago, the fiefdom was shared between Nocturna and Astriona, with everything north of the river part of Nocturna and everything south of the river belonging to the Siphons. And that is basically where the war broke out. And the northern edges belong to Nocturna, while Astriona has control of the city itself. At the war camp, everybody is, you know, it's clear that they very much respect Stark, which there's a reason for that, which I'll get more into that in Stark's section. Aegith meets them and she tells them that 3 days ago, there have been sightings of children being moved in and out by the guards. Haven't been any confirmed sightings yet because they didn't want to raise suspicions. While they are discussing that, Marin is very grateful for Anasa that she came with her and that she supports her in this. So I did like that aspect of their bond. Like, it seems like even though in this section they do have some strife, there are parts where Marin is very grateful for Anasa. Marin finally sees some images of Siphons and she describes them as very beautiful. Their faces are almost human, but the eyes are too large, the bone structure too delicate, too perfect to belong to any mere mortal. And then she sees a picture of their king, whose name is Lucian Brightbane. He looks like he's in his late 20s, but apparently he's centuries old. And something interesting, there's something familiar about those eyes, something I recognize faintly in the otherworldly planes of his countenance, but I can't place it. My theory is that those eyes look like either Killian or the king. That's what I think. Yes. I become more convinced of that fact. Well, not a fact, of that theory. And she can't seem to let it go. Like later on in this page, she still thinks about, while they're, even though they, like Stark is making a plan of getting her sister, she kind of is distracted by thinking, where have I seen that face before? Obviously, there's a reason that's there. I'm sure hopefully we'll find, I think we find out in this book why that is. So they do end up going and trying to get infiltrating this place where they think they have these children. And Maren is just like a horny girl, like she is. So she finally sees Stark actually in action and not just in a instructor capacity, and she's mesmerized by him. She describes him as centered, calm, completely focused, coldly efficient. And she notices that his face is ridiculously handsome when he's not scowling, beautiful even. Anyway, I don't know why I put that here. I should have put it in the Stark section, but hey ho. When they infiltrate, they realize that the kids are not there. We also find out that the way to ensure that siphons die is by beheading them, so that's interesting information. We also find out that siphon magic smells like a sickly sweet scent that sparks in your nose like champagne. So even though the children are not there currently, they do realize that they were here not that long ago, because there are scraps of children's clothing inside the cells, food bowls, and a battered doll. So they knew they were coming, but they did capture one siphon guard that, of course, Maren is gonna question by torturing him, which not as brutal as the Nabber torture scene, but still kind of brutal. And the siphon also has no idea what the fuck Nabbers are. And even though they torture him, he tells her that he has no idea about children. But even if he did, he wouldn't tell them, so they end up killing him. So that was the siphon storyline. We don't really come back to that storyline in this section. So let's move on to the pack and pack dynamics and everything that goes along with that. When Maren and Stark get back to the city, she wants to see her mom to give her an update on Sayla. But when she gets there, she finds out her mom is dead, which I did not see that coming, I do have to say. 3 days ago, she wandered into the city square and got into some kind of altercation with the guards, which is interesting because obviously the guards seem to, well, not all of the guards, but some of the guards seem to answer to Killian, which I'm giving him some side eye. In fact, more than some side eye. Bombastic side eye, okay? It keeps ramping up. I will talk about that at the end of the recap, my feelings about him. Anyway, we don't know if he has anything to do with that, but I am giving him bombastic side eye. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. She got into an altercation and they subdued her forcefully, which ended up killing her. Obviously, Maren is devastated. She feels guilty. She feels like if she was there, she could have stopped it, but of course she wasn't there. And then she goes to look for Killian, like she wants to speak to him, but also for comfort, obviously. He comforts her and he tells her that she shouldn't blame herself, because, he's been visiting her and she seemed fine, which is also what Igor said, that she had been doing fine. And then that is so devastating. She tells him that she's all alone now. Obviously, her mom died, her dad died, her sister is missing. And then he does something interesting. He proposes, which I find that to be completely inappropriate. And I'm not the only one. Anasa thinks so too. She literally just found out her mom died and you're gonna propose? How is she in her right state of mind to answer that question? But she does end up saying yes, which of course she would. She thinks she's alone, which there is a side storyline in here where while she's crying, while she's thinking that she's alone, and during the engagement, like during him proposing, Anasa tells her, you aren't alone, you have me. Maren thinks it's not the same. Surely Anasa knows that, which I don't think that's true. Like, okay, obviously a romantic relationship is different than what she has with like the bond between her and her dire wolf, but it is a very strong bond. Like, she will literally not survive if her dire wolf dies. Obviously that's not the same as having like a love, like when you're in love. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. So I don't know. Like I said, I am bombastically side-eyeing Killian, but we're gonna go more in depth about that later. So then, of course, there's the funeral, which, I mean, to be fair to Killian, he did arrange all of that. Like, he spared no expense, which, of course, I mean, he has the money, but he buys her a place in the Garden of Eternal Rest in the Northern Quarter, and it's a beautiful place. And then pretty much everybody from her old neighborhood is there, and also her friends. Isabel, Venna, Thomason, and Neva showed up. What was even more heartwarming is, like, right before the ceremony is about to begin, the entire Strategos pack shows up, like, that are at the castle. Gamma Dagon says that that they showed up because she's their alpha, so of course they had to show up, and the reason they know, because she didn't tell them, is that Stark told them, and he also showed up. She's very grateful, and in her head she thinks the pack has come to support me, and I vow that as their alpha I will look out for them in the same ways. That was sweet. Of course it's sad that her mom died, but it is sweet that she now has all these people, you know, from the girl who thought she was lonely, but also before that, the girl with no friends. The only real people she had really were her mom, who obviously she can rely on, her sister, Igor, and Lee, to now having this entire pack. It was beautiful to see. And that is one of the things I love about werewolf books in general, is like the whole pack dynamic. Like, you have such a strong bond, and I like in this book that you have that too, that you do form a pack. So I did love seeing that. Another scene similar to that is Isabel ends up checking in on Maren, and she's, you know, looking at Maren's engagement bracelet. In this world, they give bracelets when you get engaged. So Maren ends up telling her that, yes, she's engaged. And Isabel is just so happy for her. I loved seeing that. So Isabel wants to celebrate. Maren, of course, is reluctant to celebrate with everybody. So they end up, like, their core group ends up celebrating together. So Thomason, Neva, Venna, Isabel, and Maren. And they go to the kitchen, and Isabel wants to bake her a cake. They end up distracted and the cake burns, but they do have a wonderful time together. It's right before the last trial, and I did love that scene. I did. Like, it was such a sweet scene. I loved the banter between Isabel and Thomason. I loved getting to know a bit more about Neva. She tells Maren about the guy she was in love with, but also that she's seeing somebody else now. We find out that Venna has been sleeping with a lot of people, which I did enjoy the bantering with that. I did love that. And the scene ends with Venna talking to Maren about that she's still looking, she hasn't really found anything yet. Then we get the Unity trial. And before the trial begins, Maren is threatened by Jonah, which I find him perplexing because she's literally an alpha, and she does tell him, you're thinking about challenging an alpha during the trial today. You are far fucking stupider than I assumed, and believe me, I was not giving you much credit as it was. And he tells her, I would never dare challenge an alpha. I'm merely pointing out that today's a very good day to weed out any unsuitable common blood. So that was foreshadowing. So basically the Unity trial will simulate a coordinated siphon assault on the castle. Deimos will play the role of the enemy forces, attacking from multiple positions. Phylax must maintain our defensive line. Kryptos will relay critical intelligence, and Strategos must process all incoming information and coordinate the forces in real-time response. Jonah uses that opportunity to attack Henry. Well, he ends up attacking Henry's wolf, and because of that, something happens with their bond. Henry's wolf ends up attacking Henry. And Asa explains, sometimes extreme pain can sever the rider-direwolf bond. That was very hard to read because you can, like, it was clear that the direwolf was in between, like, two things. Like, he wanted to protect Henry, but he was also attacking him. It was like horrifying. Because that was happening, it also, obviously Henry was hurting because he was literally being torn to shreds little by little, but also it affected the pack since one of their own was not right. Obviously, like, they could feel the pain, they could feel the suffering. So Maren had to make the difficult decision to kill Henry herself, to mercifully kill him, and also that results in his direwolf also dying. And Anasa warns her, this will mark you. So that scene was just horrible. And I really thought that because this was like the final culling, you could still decide as a pack to kill somebody. So I genuinely thought we were gonna get a Jonah kill, but that didn't happen. I mean, I guess they didn't want to do it since we already had a similar thing happen with like his girlfriend. But how can you stand for Jonah still being part of your pack when he keeps antagonizing one of your alphas, when he kills without any reason really? So yeah, that was odd to me. The Unity trial ends with an interesting scene. The servants aren't taking Henry's body toward the castle gates, toward the room where fallen Raban's bodies are prepared to be returned to their families. Instead, they're headed towards a strange door on the far side of the arena. The servants swing a heavy iron-studded door open. Beyond it, there's a dimly flickering torch. I briefly catch a glimpse of stairs that lead down beneath the arena, like where that crown might be buried. But why? Dun, dun, dun. So obviously they are using the blood of the Rabans to do something, which I haven't talked about that crown yet. I'm going to talk about that next. I have a feeling these children that are kidnapped are also at the castle and also somehow used for their blood or something. Going to the same place where that crown is hidden? I think so. So let's talk about the next part, which is the I named it the Sturmfrost Queens. This is also where I'll talk about any visions or any weird things that are related to that. While Maren and Stark are on their way to the warfront to try and find these children, they come across the statue of the Faceless Goddess. And I put that here because I think it also has something to do with these Sturmfrost Queens, whatever the hell that may be. Maren wants to go to her, so they do. Anasa seems captivated by the Faceless Goddess. She looks almost alive. She bends in a pose of maternal caring, her hands held out as if in offering. Though her face is smooth and featureless, worn down and unidentifiable from years of pilgrims touching it, her posture suggests both power and grace. For most commoners, the king is closer to a deity than the goddess, but she's still invoked in prayer or as a curse, which we've seen that because Maren likes to invoke her as a curse. Small religious sects across the country are devoted to her, their members numbering in the thousands. And Stark is kind of making fun of her, like, don't tell me you believe in this commoner nonsense. So they kind of discuss like what each of them believes in, and he asks her, do you believe in the Faceless Goddess? She says no. If the Faceless Goddess was real, I suspect she's long since abandoned us. If we want things to improve, we have to make that happen ourselves. Even so, something about the figure calls to Maren. Part of me recognizes that it's freezing right now, but strangely, I don't feel cold. So the stone seems to be pretty warm. Okay, so I don't know if that's gonna be important at all, but I assume it's there for a reason. Because not long after, Maren dreams about the Faceless Goddess. She gets images of the Faceless Goddess morphing into her mother, blood pouring from every feature. She speaks to me in an immense ancient voice, both alien and familiar, but I can't understand what she says. And she keeps seeing like shadows move. We've also seen that in the last chapter, but that happens a couple times. But when she looks again, that doesn't seem to be happening. So yeah, I don't know what to think about that. So we're just gonna swiftly move on. After the funeral, Killian and Maren go to her mother's house, sort out the last of her mother's affairs, and to collect things that Maren might want. And Maren remembers that her mother kept things beneath the floorboards, and she finds leather-bound journals. And at first she's, thrilled about the discovery, but then she realizes, wait, those are like my mother's insane ramblings. References to someone named Lumina, mentions of Nocturne and Astrion, like the names of our two countries, but wrong. Anasa tells her, hide the journals, when Killian comes looking for Maren. So, why is Anasa interested in these journals? So later that day, Maren goes and speaks to Anasa. But Anasa is very cryptic. She doesn't say anything really. She tells her, I've told you all I can. And then Anasa tells her, what can I possibly tell you that isn't already written there in your mother's hand? Oh yeah, I forgot to say, but she sees things that she's seen before in her mother's drawings. Like she sees the crown with the two wolves' heads. Anasa tells her, perhaps it's time for you to do some research on your own. Maren questions, why did mother get better suddenly when I became bonded? She was more lucid the last few months than she has been in years. Meanwhile, I started having nightmares and hallucinations. Yeah, why is that, Maren? Then Maren realizes, wait, there is a place I can do research, which of course is Stark's office. So she goes to the bookshelf that she was so drawn to the last time, and she finds one particular book. And the first chapter is titled The Sturm Frost Queens, which of course Sturmfrost is the city that this book takes place. It's a history of Nocturna, but it's handwritten. The Sturmfrost Queens were the original rulers of Nocturna, a long matrilineal line of bonded warriors with incredible powers who ruled the kingdom for centuries. The dates listed are long before King Cyril's line took over. That is not part of their history. Their history states that Nocturna has always been ruled by an unbonded human king. But Maren thinks, someone must have ruled before the king, but then she realizes that she doesn't know the history beyond the last 500 years. They never taught us that in school. And it's also never mentioned in any history books. But according to this book that she's holding, none of what she's been taught is true, because they say, which I already talked about that like in one of the earlier chapters, Nocturna is a millennia older than we've been told, and the direwolves were a central part of the Sturmfrost line's rules. They've always been our allies. Queens who ruled with direwolves at their sides, uniting the humans, protecting them. And then she finds the drawings, which are identical to the drawings her mother drew. So she sees the crown her mother drew. Then she sees the illustration of the carving behind the tapestry in the servant passage, the one she saw before she passed out. A queen astride her direwolf, the Sturmfrost crown with the two leaping wolves perched atop her head. Meanwhile, she's, trying to ask Anasa, what is this? Anasa's not really answering. And then she gets another realization. The visions she's been having and the metal she's been seeing below the arena was that same crown. And then Stark shows up. She wants answers. What is this? Is this a children's story? Is this real? And he wants to deflect by congratulating her on her engagement. He says, you'll make an incredible queen, which I think he doesn't mean a queen being married to Killian. He means she would make an incredible Sturmfrost queen. That is my theory, which, is that even a theory now? And when she wants answers, he tells her, I can't tell you anything about that, which is the same thing Anasa told her. Maren is pissed. She thinks her direwolf is colluding with Stark. She feels betrayed by them, ends up taking the book, and he tells her, I would be careful with it, which later she surmises that means he doesn't want her to show Killian. She leaves by saying, fuck you. When Anasa asks her, what are you gonna do? She says, oh, now you want to talk? Well, too bad. Should have thought of that before keeping secrets, Anasa. And then she slams the iron wall in place between them. Then she thinks, I cannot trust Anasa or Stark. She wants to get to the bottom of her visions about what was going on with her mom without their help. Let's talk about some fun things, however. Let's talk about Stark. So when they have to sleep at an inn, which of course I knew, like when they were even mentioned inn, I knew we were gonna have a one bed scene. When they get to the inn, she finds that everybody is like being very deferential to Stark. They're very impressed by him. And she is annoyed, especially when who she thinks is a barmaid with giant breasts starts to flirt with him. So she says, bit of a cliche, don't you think? The barmaid who wants to get it in the big bad warrior's pants. So she doesn't say that to the barmaid, in fairness to her. She says that to Stark, and he tells her, Alyssa, she owns this place and another inn down the street. To be fair to her, she is ashamed, but girl, like, why are you judging? You are literally lusting after someone, the same guy I might add, when you literally have a boyfriend. Like, what the fuck? And I don't find that to be girl behavior. Like, even if she wasn't the owner of the place, Why are you judging this woman? Anyway, yeah, sometimes Maren gets on my nerves, and this was one such scene. While they are eating, this bard sings a song about a bonded hero who saves the whole city of Linsfall during a surprise siphon incursion, putting his life and his wolf's life on the line for them and valiantly defeating the threat single-handedly. And she thinks, this must be like a famous classic tale, but when Stark seems annoyed, he ends up angrily speaking to this bard and leaving. The barmaid / owner of the establishment, Alyssa, tells her he was singing about Stark. He's the hero in his song. So Maren is flabbergasted. When she gets to the inn's room, it's very small. And also, of course, it had a single bed. So Stark says, I'll take the floor. And while they are changing, he sees silvery scars on her upper thighs. So, of course, we get a classic "Who did this to you?" At first, he thinks it's Killian. So he says, I know the marks of torture when I see them. He growls, tell me who hurt you. Was it him? Your prince? She tells him that she did that to herself, which I never heard about that before, and we don't hear about that after. So what is she like? Is that self-mutilation? I don't know. While Stark is trying to get comfortable on the floor, it's impossible because he's too big to fit in that tiny space where he was supposed to sleep. She ends up telling him, just get on the bed. So they do end up sleeping in the same bed, which yes. But nothing really happens between them. They are keeping as much of a distance they can in the bed. And then, of course, she thinks, oh, he finds me disgusting or repulsive or whatever. That's why he stays so far. But then she does the same thing. So anyway, moving on. So she's trying to think of Killian to distract herself from the fact that Stark, she's literally sleeping in the same bed as Stark. Then we get another hot tattoo scene. So after she killed the Siphon, he tells her to take her shirt off because they start with the upper arms for Siphon kill marks. So while he's tattooing her, she opens up to him. She tells him why she joined the army, her mission to find Salem, and she breaks down a little. Then he licks, of course, he has to lick the wound. But then it turns sexual because he licks her again while staring at her, and then he ends up biting her. Girl. So she gets so turned on during that whole scene, which I don't blame her. I really don't. She's confused. Our girlie is confused and I don't blame her. And what is funny is a couple scenes later, she gets engaged to Killian. So there is that. Speaking of Killian, okay, so it's obvious that the authors are trying to make him, I don't know. I feel like, especially in this section, but also the section before it, he was behaving very inappropriately. I don't know. In some scenes, he would listen to her. He would do good things for her. But then in some scenes, he would behave very inappropriately and not listen to her and just do whatever the fuck he wanted. So, of course, the proposal is a very good scene of that. But also in the section before this one, which I wanted to talk about, I just forgot. It was their last sex scene. It literally starts off with her asking him, what if you let me be in charge for once? Which he, he's pretty dominant in the bedroom. So he doesn't really acknowledge, he doesn't give her that. He just says, I'll take good care of you. But then he doesn't really. Even though, I don't know. It's just a weird sex scene, in my opinion. When I have said before that I found it odd that most of the, that all of the scenes between them, the spicy scenes between them were very well written. And he was doing, MMC behavior, hero behavior. Things I normally love in romance books. I already mentioned that. But this one, I just found to be a bit off. I just found his behavior icky and weird. And then combine that with the fact that he thought it was a good idea to propose to her when her mom literally just died. So, yeah. And it's clear that we are getting more Stark scenes and less Killian scenes. So, yeah. Obviously, we're moving away from that. I just still find it odd. how many scenes we got of Killian when he's not the main love interest. So anyway, I feel like we're getting answers. So now they are, like, after that last trial, they will graduate and actually become full-fledged bonded. So that is exciting stuff. But obviously she still has issues with Anasa and Stark. So yeah, I'm gonna finish this book. I have about like less than 100, no, about 100 pages left, because there's also a Stark scene at the end that of course I'm gonna be reading too. All right, I finished this book yesterday, and actually yesterday I read the most because I really could not stop reading. Like, I feel like the last 90 pages were action-packed. I really wanted to know what was going on. I was very, very invested. So yeah, I feel like the end of the book was one of the better sections. So this recap will be chapter 50 through to the end, and also the Stark chapter. And this, I'm gonna be recapping it chronologically this time, not the way I've been doing it for the last couple of chapters, because I feel like this was mostly just plot. We barely had any romance in these last chapters, so I feel like just sticking to the way the authors wrote it is a good way to go. So obviously we just had the last trial when the raw bonds are celebrating. Maren asks Venna if she saw what happened to Henry, and Venna also noticed that. And Maren asks Venna to figure out what happened to Henry's body, what they did to him. So she, of course, agrees. And she decides to confide in her that she thinks there might be a crown hidden there. Then Killian shows up. You know, they want to have sex. Isabel walks in on them, and then Isabel invites Killian to party with the Rawbonds. He does. He seems to have a fun time, and the Rawbonds seem to like accept him into the fold. Stark, of course, shows up. He tells her she needs another tattoo. She's obviously still pissed at him, so she says that she doesn't want him to tattoo her, and he says, good, agreed. So he gets somebody else to tattoo her, and then that somebody else also has to lick her neck, and she has to come to terms with the fact that she, in fact, is not turned on by somebody else licking her. It was specifically Stark, so, you know, that's interesting for Maren. Then we get another Killian sex scene that I really don't give a fuck about, especially given everything we find out about him, but also at this point I just didn't care. Afterwards, Venna shows up and she says that she found something. And what she finds are, in fact, the children. And yes, they were not kidnapped by Siphons. Well, technically they were kidnapped by Siphons, but they were kidnapped by the king. Well, not the king, the king's guards, really. And Sayla is there. So these children have been living under the castle. They've been jailed, really. And that reunion was so cute, I have to say. That was an adorable reunion. Sayla has been here the whole time, so the whole 4 months. Basically, the king shows up every couple of weeks, and then he chooses one of them, and then they never come back. So that is fucking disturbing. Maren, unfortunately, has to leave because she knows that she cannot save Sayla, and even if she were to save Sayla, then what is she gonna do about these other children? So she needs to come up with a plan. And then she decides that, you know who she can trust? Killian. Even though it's his father doing this. So she thinks, if I tell Killian, then he's gonna help me save the children. She says Killian will help. He always has and always will. All right, girl. So when she tells him, he seems to be concerned. And they come up with a plan to kill his father. So tomorrow is a graduation ceremony. All the Rawbonds have to go to the king to receive his blessing as they become bonded. And that will be the time that she will kill him. We find out at the graduation ceremony that 76 Rawbonds will be bonded. But then the king kind of puts a wrench in the plan of Maren just outright killing him. He decides to switch it up. He says that he's disappointed that so many Rawbonds have survived. In some trials, we only have 50 survivors. So now he wants a final free-for-all battle, and he uses his dire blade to force the wolves to fight each other. Maren, since she's alpha, of course, manages to communicate with her pack, with the Certigos, and gets them to unify together, but they have to pretend that they are not working together, and of course she cannot communicate with the other packs. Eventually, Anasa and Maren manage to get to the king, and Maren does end up killing him with his dire blade. And when she turns to Killian, his face is ashen, there's no relief. He looks at me in abject horror, his eyes moving over the blood spilled across my chest to the sword to his father's corpse. Maren, what have you done? And then he calls out to the guards to seize her because she's killed the king, and Maren is standing there flabbergasted. So he betrayed her, obviously, and while she's being taken away, she looks at him and she sees a tiny satisfied twitch, his eyes glinting blue, his gaze calculating. So now, do you realize that this man cannot be trusted? I'd have to say, I mean, to be fair to Maren, I was also duped for a while there. While Maren is in her cell, she hears this voice that she's been hearing before say, get the crown. So she knows, okay, that is probably important. She's in the cell with Anasa, but Anasa has a collar on. We find out that this collar, that she cannot communicate with the pack because of this collar, but she can still communicate with Maren. Killian shows up, and Maren notices that there's something different about him, which we do find out later what that something is. And he is totally gaslighting her, which that is one thing, one criticism I have with this book is I feel like sometimes there are modern words used like gaslighting. I just feel like it takes me out of the story sometimes. And yes, what he's doing is gaslighting, I get that, but I feel like in this romantasy world, they would not use the term gaslighting, but that's just me. So he says, I'm worried about you, I'm sorry, you're turning into your mother, stuff like that. He's like, I did my best to ignore the signs, I wanted to believe you were all right. And she's like, we discussed it. He's like, we never talked about this. Like, what a fucking asshole. Oh my God, what a dick. He says that he still loves her. And, of course, Anasa is offended. She's like, liar! She just hates him, which I cannot blame her. While they're speaking, or while he is monologuing, really, Maren notices, okay, this is what it says. The movement cracks his expression. A tiny sliver of something ancient and cold flashes across his face, a glint of his eyes, a tightening of his jaw before disappearing again behind concern and affection. So he's acting, but, sometimes something will slip through. Okay, so then, while this is all happening, Maren is speaking to Anasa, and I feel like they come around to this conversation. But let me just go, let's just talk this through. Okay, so Maren questions Anasa, asking her if she knew that he was capable of this. You've warned me not to share too much with him. And then she says, you never gave me a reason. You never gave me anything. You still won't, will you? And then she says, you realize this is why I put my trust in him over you. You're supposed to be my partner, my direwolf, my bonded, but you can't even be honest with me. I don't know. I feel like, yes, she has a point. Really, she does. Obviously, Anasa has been keeping secrets. We later find out why that is. And yes, Anasa has not clearly stated, I don't trust him. Maybe you should not actually give him your secrets, stuff like that. But I feel like it is very easy to blame Anasa because Killian already showed you that he cannot be trusted, yet you forgave him anyway and decided to tell him all your secrets. You already proved that he is capable of pretending to be somebody else for a whole ass year, and yet you still trusted him over your direwolf, who you literally can communicate with and in your head, who you can share emotions with. So I feel like it's a complicated thing because she's not wrong. Anasa has kept some vital information and has kept her feelings and emotions away from Maren. But I feel like it's very easy to put all the blame on somebody other than yourself, Maren. Anyway, so Maren decides, asks Anasa, can you still communicate with your mate? And Anasa says yes, which of course is good because she can communicate with somebody other than Maren. Anasa says, trust goes two ways, Maren. You say I have given you nothing. What have you given me? You demand I show you my mate in the light, yet you hide away with your prince in the dark. You may not trust me fully, but I cannot trust you either. This is why I kept my mate a secret. I could never be certain that you would not have taken his name to the prince. clock her. Okay, you tell her, diva. Okay, you tell her. Regardless, this has benefited us. He has not thought to ward us against mate communication because this caller did not account for mates. Marin asks her to contact her mate, have them get in touch with Venna. And she says, I know my trust has been misplaced with Killian, but I truly believe Venna will help us. She can help your mate and their rider get around the guards. And then she says, tell your mate there's a crown buried under the arena in the drain at the center. They need to find a way to retrieve it and bring it here. And then Anasa says, which is weird, is that a direct order? Her intensity tells me that her question is important, that the answer is important too. I know suddenly that it needs to be an order. And Marin says, yes, Anasa, I order you to tell your mate where the crown is. I order your mate to get the crown and bring it here to us. And Anasa does. So yes, we're finally finding out who Anasa's mate is. But I think we all know who that mate was from the very beginning. So of course, Stark walks in and we find out that obviously Kratos, Stark's dire wolf, is Anasa's mate. That was clear. Like obviously fourth wing, yes. Anasa finally lets Marin feel the extent of her feelings for Kratos, which turns Marin on, which I have issues with this. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they're navigating that, how they're going to navigate that in book 2, because I feel like there's going to be issues here with free will if the mating bond between the wolves affect the humans this much. And yes, I feel like they try to remedy that by having that Stark chapter and have him be attracted to her before, and having Marin be attracted to Stark even before she felt the weight of the mate bond. But this scene right here makes it clear that she cannot really differentiate between Anasa's feelings for Kratos and her own feelings for Stark. So like I said, I am interested to see how they're going to navigate that in book 2. So when she realizes this, she has these questions. Why didn't he tell me? Why has he made my life hell? How did he hide this so well? Has he felt this pull from the start? So Stark gives her the crown, and she ends up putting the crown on her head. And then she gets a vision. She sees the castle, but the castle looks very, very different. So there's no two sides. It's like the whole castle is available for everybody. They are bonded and humans alike, and they live in harmony really with each other. Then she sees a woman sitting on a throne with long silver hair that falls in a shining waterfall over her shoulders, down her hips. Atop her silver hair sits the golden crown with its twin wolves. At her throat, my opal necklace. At her hip, the wolf pommel sword. And at her feet, the largest direwolf I've ever seen, with glossy silver white fur. She is breastfeeding a baby. And her name is Queen Kiara. A woman rushes to the throne, wearing some sort of military uniform. And she tells Queen Kiara that Siphons have infiltrated the palace. And she gives her child to this woman, telling her to protect the child with your life, get out of the castle and hide her. So the woman does. And then she gives the woman the opal necklace. And Marin asks, is it possible that this necklace stayed with the baby's family all these years? That the queen is my ancestor. So Queen Kiara is ready to fight, but there's a Siphon who showed up. And he tells her that he already killed her husband and her children, and that somebody is getting ready to hunt down this baby. And his name is Lucian Brightbane. So, the Siphon King of Astriona. No, wait, that's not true. Do we know his first name? Anyway, he's a Brightbane. And he ends up killing her direwolf, which of course also kills her. He says, your bonded will be my instruments for vengeance. And Marin hears the voice that she's been hearing the whole time saying, Kiara Sturmfrost is dead. Marin Sturmfrost has returned. Long live Queen Sturmfrost. Stark keeps looking at her. He's not really saying anything. And she says, eventually, I'm the rightful queen of Nocturna, aren't I? And he goes down on one knee and says, welcome home, my queen. So editing Aya here. I kind of predicted this, the fact that Marin is from like royal family, sort of. I predicted it when Marin and Anasa went to visit her mom. So I'll leave my theorizing right here. Okay, so here's my theory, okay? Okay, so in this chapter, Maren also gets this necklace from her mom. And I think like there has to be something special about Maren's mom and Maren. I think maybe they are like long lost queens, or maybe they are like maybe they are from a bonded family actually, but for some reason they've forgotten that. I don't know. It's just strange to me how Maren becomes so important all of a sudden. Why fierce direwolf that hasn't bonded to anyone all of a sudden wants to bond to Maren. Stark acts strangely around her. He calls her princess too. And now she's bowing to Maren's mom, who is a nobody really. So like that leads me to think that she's in fact not nobody. She is somebody important. And then we find out, okay, why doesn't anybody know about this? Why have Anasa and Stark been acting weird? So they do explain. The Bonded have been under a siphon blood curse for 500 years. That crown and the sword together control the human bonds to the direwolves. Even though they didn't know what happened to the crown, it makes sense that it was hidden under the arena, because the more direwolf and bonded blood spilled on it, the stronger the king's control became. The Siphon, who overthrew the rightful royal family, used powerful blood magic to bind the public's memories of the Sturmfrost royals. No one was permitted to speak of them again, and within a generation they were forgotten by everyone except for my family. So this is Stark talking. They are the sworn protectors of the royal line. So she finally realizes what that means. So they are the sworn protectors of Maren and her line, and not the royals that are in charge now. So we find out that the woman who was handed the baby was an ancestor of Stark's. And the reason they remember is because of that book that she read, and that book has been handed down through generations, because they could not speak about the Sturmfrost queens, but they could still read about it. So that makes Maren finally realize why they never told her. So they literally couldn't speak about it, and that is why she had to give Anasa a direct order to get the crown. He tells her that they've been waiting for the day a Sturmfrost royal might become bonded again, because all these years nobody in Maren's family has become bonded. So Maren this did not move her from changing her mind about Stark. So she says, if you're my family's protector, why have you been trying to kill me since the moment I got here? And he is just gagged when she tells him. He says, I've been doing everything in my power to keep you safe. So then she finally finds out, okay, he's the one who moved her to her own quarters. And he says, who has been training you and strengthening you at every turn? Me. So she says, I cannot believe Killian took credit for that. Really? After everything you've seen about Killian, you still cannot believe Killian would do something like that? And then she talks about like the voice trial and him threatening her. And he says, I was just warning you because you were drunk. And then she says, from the start, you've hated me. And he says, of course I hated you, Maren. Can you blame me? My family has waited hundreds of years for your arrival, keeping the secret alive. I've waited. And when the Sturmfrost royal finally makes her appearance, she's weak and in love with the person whose family stole her birthright. Yes, tell her. He says, do you know how hard it was to see you with him? To know who you were, even when you didn't, sickening magic, silencing me, to endure our wolf's mate bond on top of it all. My poor baby. And then Anasa is like in the background cheering Stark on, so she knocks down the thin filter so Maren can feel the mating bond again. And she says, it's punishing. It's a need so strong that I'm almost angry at my emptiness. I look at Stark and my entire body screams that I'm missing him. And like she has to remind herself, no, it's not me and Stark, it's Kratos and Anasa. And then we find out that it was actually him who picked that dress out for her. Once again, Killian taking credit when he shouldn't. Do you have any idea what it felt like to watch you at the forging ball in the dress I picked for you, swirling in your lover's arms and bowing to his traitorous father? And she finds out, the reason why Stark was executing that man publicly is because he threatened her. So he has been watching her for longer than she thought. She asks, is Killian a siphon too? And he tells her, we don't really know. The original king who stole the throne died. All his progeny throughout the years also died. And Stark doesn't really know. And then she once again asks them, why didn't you tell me about Killian? And then Anasa growls at her and says, and you would have believed us. And then she actually like admits in her head, of course I wouldn't have, not even when I was furious at Killian for hiding his identity. I've been fighting them both the moment I started the trials. I did this all to myself. If I'd never gotten involved with him to begin with, would Sayla have been safe? Would my mother still be alive? But then she thinks, okay, then I also wouldn't have become bonded. So, you know, not that we like Killian, but like these events did take place and eventually she became bonded, which enabled her to, you know, take up her royal line, I guess. Then Stark says, give me the word and I'll tear out his throat. All the lives I've ever taken were just training for this moment, my queen. Make me your instrument of vengeance. Let my hands act out your every savage, depraved thought. Use me, I'm yours. She starts crying. And then she says, thank you, but this is my score to settle. She wants to ask him questions too. So he says, I tell you to not put yourself in danger, but I know you better than that. She asks, you're worried? He says, never, you are the danger. Any person who doesn't see that deserves what's coming to them. All right, my battery is dying, so I'm gonna come back. Alrighty, I'm back. Let's continue because this vlog is already so fucking long. I need to not ramble too much. Meryn decides to play ball with Killian, like pretend that she's this docile, mentally ill person so that hopefully she can kill him. She speaks to Anasa saying that she's in Killian's room and that she should have Stark take her now because the guards are outside of Killian's rooms because they rightfully think that Meryn might hurt him. And Anasa tells her, okay, he's on his way. We'll come to you as soon as you summon us. Which I don't know if I said. Anasa and Stark can communicate with each other because of this mate bond. So will we get to see Meryn communicate with Kratos? I would like that. So anyway, there are these two servant women who are gonna dress Meryn up like the little docile queen that Killian wants her to be. So he shows up, and even though like they agree that she's not well mentally, that doesn't prevent him from wanting to have sex with her anyway. So he's just a sick fuck, obviously. She says, you know, I think I'm losing my mind like my mother, and then she instantly feels guilty. Mother wasn't mad, neither were all the women in my family before her. The visions, the voices, all of it was just our unfulfilled birthright screaming, clawing to the surface. A fresh wave of grief hits me, sudden and jarring. So while they are, you know, kissing and almost having sex, she ends up pinning him down and she grabs the dire blade. And he just seems amused. He says, kinky, you're trying to behead the second king with that sword. 2 in a day probably sets a record. And she says, you're no king, and neither was your impostor father. And he just laughs and says, so he finally figured it out. She asks him, did you know who I was the entire time? And he says, of course I knew. What, you were hoping it was just a coincidence that the current crown prince and the heir to the original royal line happened to meet in a market one day and end up in a relationship? There are no such things as coincidences. So he turns out to be like a evil movie villain, like complete with a evil monologue. So he says, Whisper said Queen Kiara kept her baby alive. My ancestors decided it hardly mattered since no one remembered her anyway, but I had a plan for the Stormfrost Royal. I hunted you down, I sought you out, I made you mine. When she says, you know, I loved you, you were using me, he says, you wound me, Meryn. I wasn't just using you. I love you. Everything I've done is for your own good. For the good of the kingdom. And Meryn thinks the fucked up thing is, I think he believes what he's saying. We find out that he's actually the one who killed her mother. And he says, I didn't feel good about that, but if you were going to be my queen, her powers needed to pass to you. It was her time. So we find out that Meryn actually has powers. The Stormfrost Royals have magic that has been suppressed for centuries. And Killian tells her that he needs her. Like, he really needs her magic. And then his voice changes. The voice says Killian got greedy. And we find out that it's Alistair Brightbane. The same person, or the same siphon who killed Queen Kiara. Which... yeah, so Alistair Brightbane is the one who rules Nocturne, and then Lucian Brightbane rules Astriona. So what, are they brothers? It doesn't matter. I think we find out in the next book. She asks Killian, are you a siphon? Were you always? And he says, no, not always. When it was clear that you were onto my father, Alistair demanded to be transferred. He's passed this way for the last 500 years. Each new king in our line serves as his vessel. When she asks how is that even possible, he says transference magic, a particularly complicated type of siphon blood magic. Only someone with the great power of Alistair Brightbane could pull this off. The usurper king never gone after all. He's been here the whole time, hiding in plain sight. Killian's father was a siphon, and he turned Killian on the day of graduation ceremony. He drank Henry's blood. So she finally finds out why he was taken under the arena, so that Killian could use him to transform into a siphon. And then she sees his eyes change again, and she realizes that must be related to that transference magic he was talking about. And then she asks about the kids, and she finds out that yes, it was his father draining the kids, because transference magic is tough to hold, particularly during bonding trials where we also need to control so many wolves. Only the strong blood of children could give us the power we need. Disgusting. I hate them, okay? So editing Aya here, I am obviously editing this video, and I realized that I totally forgot that I made that I predicted this. Like, I had a theory. I made this prediction in the section that was chapter 20 through 30. So pretty early on in the book, I do have to say. So I'll insert me theorizing right here. I just had a theory. We'll see if this is correct. So what I think, so it says here that they manipulate people and that they use blood. And in the visions Marin has been getting, she sees a lot of blood around the castle. Why do I have a feeling that the king may be a siphon? And maybe even Killian is. I think that is my theory. I don't have concrete evidence, but that's what I think. Yeah. Moving on. And when she says, okay, this needs to stop now. Whatever I felt for him needs, it doesn't matter. And when she's ready to kill him, the shadows that she's been seeing moving around grab her, and she's yanked off Killian. She screams at Anasa to come and get her, through their bond. Stark has the crown. Marin puts it on her head, and she feels the magic. But she also feels like she cannot access, she can only access a fraction of her magic. And Killian, of course, begins to laugh. So he says, you've been keeping secrets from me, Marin. I didn't realize your wolf had a mate. So when Stark is getting ready to charge at Killian using his Deimos powers, it backfires on Stark. And Killian says, don't you know that you can't use your little direwolf powers against this magic? After all, your powers are rent from mine. Well, from Marin's, technically. And then he says, thank you so much for my new power, beloved. As a parting gift, I've left you a little surprise. Which, yes, we will find out what that surprise is. And then both Stark and Marin realize that it is the engagement bracelet that is taking her powers. But when she's trying to take it off, it actually tightens on her wrist. So that means that she cannot take it off. There's nothing I can do to take this bracelet off, not without the siphon magic that created it. This is what Killian's done to me. Sunk his fangs so deep, right to the heart of me. Stolen my crown, stolen my powers, and now he won't let go. So I guess I finally understand why we needed so many moments between them. That makes the betrayal that more devastating. Having said that, I still feel like we didn't need 4 full-length sex scenes between them. I still feel like she could have condensed it a bit. I feel like some things you can just say without us actually having to see it. Because it was clear from the beginning that she was not going to end up with Killian. So it was just weird that we saw so much of him. I feel like this betrayal would still come off, right? Even if we didn't get so many scenes. I still feel like it was a bit too repetitive in the whole Killian, Marin department. But anyway, Stark's trying to comfort her, and she just feels like it's a bit too much, this physical contact, and he backs off. She wants to see Sayla, so they go to her, and on their way to her, both her and Stark see the shadows around them shifting, trembling, alive. Those shadows haven't really been explained too much, so hopefully we'll find that out in the next book. We get another reunion scene between Sayla and Marin. And she ends up telling Sayla everything. She tells her about their family line, and Sayla is very interested and happy about that fact. She says, so if I'm a princess and our family oversees the direwolves, do I get to become bonded someday? And then she actually meets Anasa, and she starts, talking to her like she's a cute dog, and Anasa is very offended. And when Marin becomes a bit worried for Sayla that if she does become bonded, she has to go through the bonding trials, Anasa actually tells her she doesn't have to do the trials. No one does if you don't want them to happen anymore. Marin says, what are you talking about? I thought the direwolves designed the trials. That's what Egith says. Anasa tells her it's a lie. The bonded were told this to keep them from revolting against the king. This was his way of controlling our population. He wanted our strength, but not in large enough numbers to rise up against him. Isn't that a tale as old as time? But it can all change now. You can make the change. The trials can be whatever you want them to be. But first, you need to claim the crown publicly. To lead, you need people to agree to follow. And now that Marin knows that she's actually the queen, Anasa can actually reach all the direwolves. So she's now, I guess, more of the sovereign alpha. Like, she has similar powers. Anasa tells all the wolves what is actually going on now that they can finally speak about it, since Marin found out about her birthright. And the wolves immediately call her their queen. But Marin finally understands what that little surprise was that Killian talked about. He turned Sayla into a siphon. So yeah, there's that. The book ends with Marin not being deterred. She says, I won't accept this. First, I'll find a way to heal my sister, and then I'm coming for him. I am Marin Sturmfrost, queen of Nocturna, and I will use the twisting dark in my bones and my blood to hunt Killian Valtier to the ends of the earth. Bum, bum, bum. So I do think I'll like book 2 more than this one. I think Killian is a compelling villain, especially since they've been together for a year. He duped her already, twice actually. And also with the whole Brightbane of it all. I'm interested. Let's actually talk through the Stark chapter, because this is just a bonus chapter, but it's things from his perspective on the days before Marin became bonded. We get Kratos and Stark talking to each other. We see the mating bond from Kratos' point of view, really. Kratos, hates the fact that his mate is not with him at the war front, but he does know why she never bonded with anyone. Because really, she's been waiting for one of the Sturmfrost queens to bond. And we find out that his family has always been keeping an eye on the Sturmfrost women. Sometimes they will interfere if it gets too bad. And now that task has been given to him. And he's kind of been keeping his distance. But now he's back. And actually, Prina, the wife of Igor, has kind of been his little spy. And she, even though I did like her, from the little we've seen of her, but I don't know. I have to say I don't really love the way Sable Sorensen writes some women in this book, because she hates Marin and her mom because his husband spent so much time with them. Anyway, he asks about Marin's mom, and then he asks about the daughters, and he finds out that Marin has been fighting and that Prina is not impressed. He asks about her mental state, and she says, yes, she's crazy, but not in the way that he was meaning, of course. He wants to know the address of the fight. And when he is getting ready to leave, he goes by the Cooper's house and sees Natalia, and he sees that she's definitely worse than the last time he saw her, oh yeah. And we find out that the reason the Cooper women get these hallucinations and why it really affects their mental health is because... Okay, let me just read this. It's his family's responsibility to keep all the women in the Sturmfrost line safe right up until they start to hallucinate. It's the lack of a bond that causes it. Their family line is tied the most closely to the direwolves, but none of the rightful rulers have bonded, not for generations. Eventually, they all go mad. That's their destiny. And watching them, waiting for them to lose themselves to it, unable to step in or even fucking say anything, that's his. And even though he's very powerful, that makes him feel so powerless. Yeah, he watches, and it's also since he has to protect these women, he almost wants to step in when it seems like Natalia is getting ready to attack Sayla. But of course, we know Marin has trained her to hide whenever their mother gets really bad. Then he goes to the fight. and he sees Marin, and he's like attracted to her, even though their direwolves have not bonded yet, of course. Even though she doesn't have a direwolf yet, so it technically cannot be the mating bond. He thinks, fuck, she's sensational, how inconvenient. She's obviously getting ready to fight, and he thinks, okay, I have to step in if she gets hurt, but of course we know that she doesn't need his help. And then he sees Prince Killian, which of course he knows who Prince Killian is, but nobody else knows because the king has been keeping him locked away. And we find out what he actually thinks of Prince Killian. He's a slimy fucking weasel of a boy who turned into a slimy fucking weasel of a man. And he sees the look on Killian's face. It's smug. So Stark instantly knows that Killian is using her for something. This cannot be a coincidence. The usurper heir to the throne dating the true heir. The timing is so suspicious with the bonding trials on the horizon. Is he going to send her into them? Does he want her to bond for some reason? And then in the back of his mind, he thinks, let the princess reclaim her place. And he feels guilty, the fact that she is now entangled with the prince because he has been at the war front as much as possible for these last couple of years. And then he sees the guy threatening her. He actually ends up cornering that man outside right away. And the man thinks that he's there for him because he deserted. So Stark is like, okay, well, this is my perfect excuse. I'm gonna kill you now. Egith was against the idea of being so brutal, but he wanted Marin and the rest of the commoners to see how brutal they were. I have to confess, I don't really understand his thought process. He sees Marin and he sees her look of pure hatred. Satisfaction slithers through him and he feels his face pull into a sneer. She hates him, fine. He hates himself too, but no more than he loathes her. She and her family have dictated his entire life, and for what? For her to throw it all away, getting herself into an absolutely idiotic position with that carnivorous snake. For her to be literally fucking the enemy. But I mean, that is really not her fault. I mean, I know I don't always give Marin the benefit of the doubt, obviously, but in this case, she's just a commoner. She has no idea about her birthright. She's not even a bonded yet. Killian is obviously a very good actor. This really is not her fault. It's clear he is very interested in her because he just like, the chapter basically ends with, look at me, this is all for you, everything is for you, look at me. And then he says, Stark will use every ounce of her hatred to stroke it until she can burn the world down. So I do like getting his point of view. I really want to get his point of view in the next book now that most of the secrets have been revealed. I did enjoy it. It's 4 stars. Obviously, I have some big issues with it, but at the end of the day, there were a lot of points where I was entertained. Yes, there are points where I could easily put it down, especially when we got to like the repetitive scenes, the more boring parts. But when we got into the action, I found myself not being able to look away. I found myself inhaling parts of this book. So I did enjoy it, and I am glad that I read this right before book 2, because I honestly don't think that if I had read this a year ago, I would be salivating for book 2. But now I am set, I am ready. I really want to know what they're going to do with book 2. And hopefully it will be a bit less repetitive, book 2. And obviously now it's clear who the enemy is. And I am interested for Marin to find out and figure out her birthright, figure out her powers, and to see like what she will be like as an actual leader. And I really am interested, like, where will most of the book take place? Like, will it be at the castle? Obviously, she's very tied to Killian now. He literally has her in shackles. So we're gonna see. I am done talking, so I'm gonna just leave it here. Let me know in the comments below. Obviously, I'm assuming you have read this book by now. I have tabbed the hell out of this book, as you can see. So let me know all your thoughts. Do you agree with my thoughts? What are your big theories for book 2 if you're watching this before book 2 comes out? Let me know all your thoughts. And if you have made it this far, then I commend you, and please leave me a wolf emoji to let me know your dedication. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know by leaving a like if you did, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.